Third part. Chapter 41 Self-Study. 3. 2. Hope counted down expressionlessly, and it was clear from his voice that there was no joking involved. Ah. Before the last number was uttered, Haiwa and Beige finally made their move. The sharp tip of the knife pierced through the fabric of the pants and stabbed directly into the thigh. Blood splashed out, and the two screamed in pain instantly, their faces twisted. Ha! Looking at their miserable appearance, Hope had no sympathy at all. He walked past Haiwa without any sympathy, leaving two figures groaning on the ground with their legs in their arms, and left directly. The revolver in his hand turned into a golden gallon again. Slightly away from the alley, he went into another alley, making sure that no one wanted to attack him this time. He performed the phantom shift and disappeared immediately. Hope returned to the villa in the Magic City. Sure enough, the 2,000 kilograms of mutton that had been delivered were already placed here, and Gao Lin had already left. After finishing the mutton, he saw that the progress points of the Fusion Fire Dragon had increased by nearly 200 points again, and he immediately felt a sense of satisfaction. I wonder if his tough skin can withstand bullets. It just so happens that he has ready-made gun bullets here. Of course, this is just a thought. He is not stupid enough to shoot himself. Then he apparat to Beijing and came to the agency he had visited at noon. Mr. Hua, this is the information about the villa you want. A young man wearing a slightly old-fashioned suit and slicked hair respectfully handed a stack of information to Hope. Even though Hope looked very young, he was worthy of respect in his eyes. Hope flipped through it casually. The price was a little higher than that in the Magic City, but not much more expensive. This is a villa in the third ring. The people who live here are either rich or noble. Of course, most of them are foreign businessmen, who don't lack that money. Just this one. Hope chose a single-family villa that looked more pleasing to the eye, which also included a swimming pool. No problem, just pay the rent for 1 year in one lump sum. The young man saw Hope agreed generously, and a hint of joy appeared on his face. The commission he can get will not be small. No problem. Hope took out 2 stacks of money from his purse, counted them and handed them over. He was not afraid of being cheated. It was too easy to find the money he handed over. By the way, Mr. Hua, I contacted several suppliers for another thing you told me. The initial agreement is about 500 lambs per day, but are you sure? A lamb costs about 30 yuan, and 500 lambs cost 15,000 yuan, which is not a small amount. Hearing this, Hope's face suddenly cheered up. He didn't expect that the capital city gave him such a big surprise, and because he was looking for suppliers to purchase goods, the price was much cheaper than that of the Magic City. Of course, you help keep an eye on this matter. Remember, I want goats. If you do a good job, I will give you a big red envelope. Yes, Mr. Hua, I will do a good job. The young man was excited when he heard it, and patted his chest to promise that he would never let Hope down. Hope's eyes flickered slightly. In this way, he could completely integrate the Fire Dragon in just a dozen days. After confirming some things with the agent, Hope left. With the introduction of the agency, he found a company with some strength in the city and exchanged all the pounds on him. The price was a little lower than that in the Magic City, but he also exchanged as much as 190,000. Together with the remaining money on him, it was enough to complete the task of dragon fusion. When he returned to Hogwarts, it was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon here. Today was Saturday, and everyone in the dormitory disappeared. Hope rarely came to the library and looked around. Hermione, who often appeared in the library on weekdays, was not seen today. Could it be that she was still angry with Ron? He was not worried at first. After all, those hurtful words were not spoken from his mouth, but he didn't know whether Hermione would take it out on him. Maybe he should prepare a gift for Hermione. After all, she is his homework partner. After secretly noting this matter in his heart, he came to the bookshelf in the library, walked around, and took a few spell books from the bookshelf. It is a shame for a wizard not to know spells. If he had not successfully fooled the other party in the situation he encountered today, he probably would have no way out. No wonder. If he really wanted to attack an ordinary person, there were actually many ways. In that case, even if he did not have self-transformation and tough skin, he would have a way to make the other party pay the price. He only needed to use digging to make a hole in the ground. As long as the other party stepped into it and any part of his body appeared below the ground, he would be at his mercy. At that time, he could easily pull him into the ground and bury him alive. When he thought about it, a strange idea suddenly emerged in Hope's mind. If one day an invincible enemy appeared in Hogwarts and was not on the first floor, could he sink the Hogwarts castle directly into the ground, so that he could use the digging properties? He couldn't help but touch his chin, feeling that this idea was very feasible. Hope came here simply to learn some self-defense magic and more magical means. Then he quickly searched in the magic book. Most of the attacking spells appeared in the textbooks of senior grades. Finally, Hope found a more suitable spell, the whole body binding spell. The spell is to petrify everything. After using it, the target can be paralyzed and unable to move. The most important thing is that this is not a very advanced magic. It is a little more difficult than the magic of the first grade, but it is still far from the real advanced magic. Hope then put the other magic books back to their original places, took this magic book to find Madame Pants to register, and then borrowed it. Back in the dormitory, Hope took out his wand and began to practice according to the contents of the book. Facts have proved that his magic talent is not that strong, and it is more efficient to listen to the class than to study by himself. Without Professor Flitwick's experience, everything can only be explored by himself. In a blink of an eye, the afternoon passed, and Harry and the others came back one after another. After asking, they learned that they went to watch Harry practice Quidditch. Then the 4 people in the dormitory walked to the auditorium together and started today's dinner. "Potter, I heard that you tried to sneak out yesterday but failed. You were so scared that you ran to ask for help at night, but found nothing. Ha ha ha. Is this the little lion of Gryffindor? I think we should still call it the stupid lion who was scared out of his wits." Just as they sat down, Malfoy and his group came in. When they saw Harry, they immediately said loudly with a mocking face, and their voices spread throughout the hall. "Have fun reading every day during the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 42 Calmness. Harry's face suddenly turned ugly. Before Harry could say anything, Malfoy turned around and went to the Slytherin table. "Snape must be slandering us," Ron said very confidently. There were only a few people who knew about this. How did they know it? In fact, as Ron said, this matter was accidentally leaked when Snape and Malfoy were chatting. "I think we shouldn't tell Professor McGonagall that the secret passage is next to Slytherin. Even if the big spider runs out, Malfoy will be eaten first." Harry also said indignantly, but it was just angry words, because the big spider was gone. Hope's eyes flashed when he heard this. This is a good idea. Several people started to eat immediately. Hope glanced at the Gryffindor table. From the time they came in to the time they were about to finish eating, they didn't see Hermione the whole time. It seems that the anger has not subsided. Hope didn't have much bad feelings towards Hermione. On the one hand, Hermione was just a little proud and a stickler for rules. She valued the house points and rules more than anything else. She was especially sensitive to Harry and Ron. She often wanted to control Harry and Ron to prevent them from deducting the house points she had worked so hard to earn. In fact, Harry and Ron were often deducted points, mostly because of Snape's malicious targeting. And because Hope had added points in the spells class twice, Hermione didn't have such a strong desire to control him. On the other hand, he knew that Hermione would change, but it was only temporary. She was assigned to Gryffindor, and in fact, she was the same type of person as other Gryffindors. "Did you go to apologize to Hermione?" Hope asked, although he had expected it in his heart. "I forgot. I was busy watching Harry practice Quidditch today. You don't know how handsome Harry was at that time." Ron did forget about this matter and didn't care. Hope shook his head secretly. With Ron's personality, he probably would think of this on Monday when he was busy. It seems that he really needs to prepare a gift tomorrow. What kind of gift will satisfy Hermione? Pounds? Galleons? What price can be paid to cover all the homework for 7 years? Hope couldn't help thinking. Of course, it was just a joke. He knew Hermione's personality. After returning to the dormitory after dinner, Ron asked about Hope's whereabouts today. After all, Hope disappeared when he woke up in the morning. I slipped out. Hope was prepared and said frankly. Aren't you afraid of the big spider? Harry and Ron said with wide eyes in disbelief. Didn't Professor McGonagall find it yesterday? It means it has run away. How about going out together tomorrow? Hope said indifferently, quietly observing Harry and the others' expressions. Sure enough, the two of them changed their expressions, without any hesitation, and refused directly. Their yearning for the outside world was not as great as their own lives. Hope smiled secretly, then left the dormitory and went to the bathroom. He used the treasure to sense the wand on Malfoy and saw that he was walking towards the Slytherin common room and was almost on the first floor. As soon as he entered a cubicle in the bathroom, Hope immediately performed apparition and appeared in the utility room last night, with no one around. The next moment he began to transform, and in a flash he turned into the appearance of the eight-eyed giant spider yesterday. Moreover, because the space here was not as narrow as in the secret passage, the size he transformed into was twice as large as yesterday. The mouthparts in front of the mouth alone were as long as an adult's arm. Then Hope directly used this body to perform apparition and appeared at the corner of the corridor on the first underground floor, which was also the only way to Slytherin. Fortunately, his time was just right, there were no other Slytherin students around, and he sensed that Malfoy would soon have an intimate encounter with him. I saw Harry Potter training at the Quidditch training ground today, Malfoy. Humph, it seems that Gryffindor wants to win so badly that they let a freshman be the seeker. Look, Gryffindor will fall down soon. Let's see if Potter can still laugh. Before they saw the people, Hope had heard their voices and soon saw 3 figures coming out of the corner in front. They were Malfoy and his 2 followers. Just when they walked in from the corner, they didn't notice the eight-eyed giant spider occupying the entire passage at first glance. Inadvertently looking forward, several people stopped in an instant. The expressions on the faces of Malfoy and the other 2 were directly sluggish, and they stared at the 8 huge eyes on Hope's face. I wonder if they can see the smile on the face of the eight-eyed giant spider. Spider, spider, spider. Malfoy was trembling all over, and he couldn't even speak properly. He felt his legs were weak and he was about to fall. His eyes were full of horror and his mouth was squeezed very big. In just a few breaths, Malfoy and the others did not react at all, as if they were frightened and stood there in a daze. The next moment, Hope opened his huge mouth and roared silently at them. Help, help! Malfoy and the others shouted loudly. Just as they were about to turn around and run, their legs softened and they tripped and fell to the ground. They sat on the ground and looked at Hope with pale faces. His 2 followers, Goyle and Crabbe, had already run a few steps, but found that Malfoy did not follow them. They turned around and saw Malfoy sitting on the ground, facing the giant spider, and the giant spider was slowly approaching Malfoy. The 2 looked at each other, gritted their teeth, and ran back at the same time regardless of the fear in their hearts, quickly pulled Malfoy up from the ground, and then ran desperately towards the first floor of the castle. Seeing them disappear around the corner, Hope had a smile on his face, but did not chase them. He glanced at the system and saw that the progress points of the fusion of Boggart had increased by 3 points. The effect was obviously good. The next moment, Hope disappeared and appeared in the utility room. He turned back to his original form and performed apparition again. He returned to the bathroom of the Gryffindor common room and walked out of the dormitory calmly. It took less than 5 minutes. Harry and the others didn't notice it at all. A few minutes after Malfoy left, Snape hurried over with a wand in his hand. His face was extremely gloomy. He didn't expect that there was really an eight-eyed giant spider sneaking into Hogwarts. However, after searching the first floor underground, nothing was found, not even a trace. Soon Professor McGonagall also appeared here, with a very serious face. I think we need to go to that secret passage to have a look. Professor McGonagall said solemnly, and then he and Snape came to the secret passage, but this time they still found nothing. Reading is fun every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 to get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, activity time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 43 Exploration. When Snape was still patrolling the castle to find the eight-eyed giant spider, Hope had already fallen asleep. The next day, when the sun rose, Hope had already arrived in Beijing. The agency had already confirmed the villa here. Of course, the identity was provided by someone in the agency. Hope had already paid them 2,000 for this order alone. They would naturally not refuse such a small matter. However, the matter of goats and lambs was not so fast. They needed to place an order first and pay for it before they could be sent from other places to Beijing. Then they were handed over to the slaughterhouse and processed according to his prior requirements. Finally, the boiled mutton was sent to the villa. Like in the Magic City, Hope specially hired a young man from the agency to do things for him, gave him a copy of the villa key, and then he helped to receive the mutton. There was one thing that was different from the Magic City. Gao Lin there was paid as his agent, while the person here was just a part-time job that he found at a casual cost of a few hundred yuan. It was estimated that he would not be needed after the matter of fusion of the fire dragon was over. Standing on the balcony on the second floor of the villa, looking into the distance, the scenery is excellent, the ears are quiet, and there is not so much noise, which is already very rare in Beijing. He has nothing to do today. He looked at the swimming pool below and thought he could swim. It can be seen that the swimming pool has been idle for a long time. It needs to be cleaned by some professionals, but Hope is a professional cleaner. A whirlwind sweep and clean-up spell went down, and the swimming pool was no longer dusty and brand new. Clear water is like a spring. Clear water gushed out from the bottom of the swimming pool, and the water level kept rising, filling the swimming pool in a blink of an eye. Hope couldn't wait to walk down the stairs to the first floor. When he came out of the living room, he was only wearing a pair of swimming trunks. He jumped, splashed, and splashed water. In this hot weather, there is nothing more comfortable than this. After swimming tired, Hope lay on the lounge chair by the swimming pool, hiding in the shadow of the sunshade fan. Unfortunately, he hadn't bought much in the villa, otherwise he would have had a bottle of ice-cold Coke at this time. Perhaps he could put the purchase of a game console on the agenda, as it would be too boring to play alone. Hope narrowed his eyes slightly, enjoying the beauty of this moment. Of course he wanted to buy such a villa directly, especially since he knew that the villas here would continue to soar over time. But there was still one thing that could not be avoided, which was the issue of identity. It was not that he had not thought about solving this problem, and in fact it was not troublesome. After all, he was also a wizard. With a confusion spell, there was always a way to get the muggles in London to give him a real identity. If magic didn't work, then pounds. But he didn't know how to use the confusion spell, and the confusion spell didn't belong to the category of life magic, so there was no way to do this for the time being. Hope suddenly remembered that today was Sunday, which meant that his homework had to be completed today, and he couldn't help but think of Hermione. What kind of gift should he give her so that she could give him her homework for reference? Hope couldn't help but turn his head and look in one direction. Maybe he should go to the local wizard gathering place to take a look. Maybe there might be something new and interesting there. I don't know what the difference is between the wizards here and the wizards in the UK. He then turned on the treasure perception and could feel that there were two places in the capital where a lot of fluorescence gathered, which also meant that there should be two relatively large gathering places in the city. Hope immediately sat up from the recliner, walked into the living room on the first floor, looked at the map hanging in the living room, and then turned on the treasure sensing. And used the positioning of the phantom shape-shifting characteristics to build a 3D model of the capital, and checked the locations of the two gathering places by comparing them with the map on the wall. This look shocked him directly. He looked at the map in disbelief, thinking that he had seen it wrong. After comparing it again, he found that there was no right or wrong. The two gathering places were really in those two places. One was the royal garden in the past, and the other was the palace in the past. Today, they are both must-visit places for tourists. They actually set up gathering places in these two places. It's incredible. At this moment, Hope became more interested in them and couldn't wait to see what it looked like there. But he still had to make some preparations before going. He didn't know how the wizards here dressed, so he couldn't use self-transformation to imitate directly. But it seems that the wizards here will go in and out of the Muggle world more or less, and directly using the clothes of local Muggles should not cause any abnormality. Then he used the self-transformation feature, and his figure suddenly rose. A middle-aged man with a serious face and a slightly thin body appeared. This look was what he had seen on the streets of Magic City before, and now he used it directly to conceal his identity. As for the clothes on his body, the upper body is a plain short-sleeved shirt with a large pocket on each side of the chest, and the lower body is a pair of black suit pants, and a pair of leather shoes on his feet. Looking at his outfit, Hope couldn't help thinking that maybe he should put on a suit for himself, like in the UK. No matter how hot the weather is, wizards will not only wear a short-sleeved shirt when going in and out of the Muggle world, after all, they have to hide their wands. After thinking about it, Hope put on a suit jacket for himself. After getting ready, Hope began to locate himself, choosing a location in the royal gardens, and then began to apparate. He had thought that he would be discovered directly, but wasn't apparition a normal thing in the wizarding world? Even if he was discovered, he wouldn't make a fuss. The next moment, Hope's figure suddenly disappeared. After apparating to the location, Hope carefully observed the surroundings, and found that there was no one around, so he breathed a sigh of relief, and then began to look at the surrounding environment. This place is located in a remote corner of the garden. It seems that a traceless extension spell has been cast, resulting in a very wide space here, which is directly isolated from the Muggle world. The scenery is also unexpectedly good. In the distance, you can see a large area of ancient buildings, surrounded by trees, birds and flowers, as if it was rebuilt by wizards to its original appearance. Hope's mood was inexplicably high. Compared with Hogwarts and Diagon Alley, this place is obviously more spectacular. Looking at those buildings, you can see that even if the history of Hogwarts Castle is thousands of years old, it can't compare to the beautiful art here. There's no one over there, let's go over there. Will it be bad for us to do this? Suddenly, two voices came, one male and one female. Judging from the voices, they seemed to be two children, and the tone of the female voice sounded a little hesitant. After thinking about it, Hope did not choose to hide. After all, he was not guilty. If it was an adult wizard, he might consider taking shelter temporarily, but if it was just two children, there was no need to worry too much. Reading books every day during the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 44, Exposed. Soon, two figures appeared at the front of the stone road, which stunned Hope. The two men also saw Hope. If they were not beside him, Hope would have opened his mouth and said, F***K. He never thought that the two men would be dressed like this. The two men looked young, at most 14 or 15 years old. The boy was wearing a gray gown and the girl was wearing a black gown. Hope couldn't help but take a breath. At first glance, he thought they were crosstalk performers or intellectuals of a certain era. The clothes were good, but they were out of tune with his current outfit. He never thought that the local wizards would be in this style. The two men had also seen him and looked at Hope with some strange eyes. Someone. The girl said shyly, blushing for some reason, as if Hope had heard everything she said just now, and pulled the boy's sleeve to leave. But the boy frowned and looked at Hope, and walked straight towards Hope. At this moment, Hope noticed that they still had a fan hanging around their waists. Who are you? Why haven't I seen you before? You shouldn't be a teacher at school. The boy asked loudly. Hope immediately heard something strange in his words, and then he knew why it was so quiet here. It turned out that this was a school. It was really unlucky. One of the two large gathering places turned out to be a school. This made his appearance look very suspicious. However, Hope did not panic. He smiled and made himself look calm. He turned around and asked, "Can't you appear here if you are not a teacher?" "Of course, but why are you dressed like this?" The boy nodded and asked. Since this is a school, the two people's outfits are normal. It turned out to be school uniforms. I just don't know if adult wizards also wear this, Hope thought to himself. There was no difference on his face, and he answered gently, "Just came back from there." Hope was secretly shocked and almost said the word muggle directly. Who knows how muggles are called here? No wonder. The boy nodded suddenly. Let's go back. The next class is about to start. The girl said softly to the boy. Hope's eyes turned back to the two of them. Next class? If the next class is about to start, why are you still running here? Obviously you were planning to skip class before. Skipping class and going into the woods? You are really something. But Hope also breathed a sigh of relief quietly. It seemed that he had fooled them. Then he made up his mind that after they left, he would leave directly. In a school, it is still easy to attract attention when unfamiliar faces appear. You don't seem to know me? Just when Hope thought they were going to leave, the boy suddenly asked, looking at Hope with suspicion. Hope was shocked in his heart. Who are you? I know you. Could it be that he met the Eastern version of Harry Potter? Why, are you famous? Are you worried that I will tell your teacher about your skipping class and going into the woods? Hope asked back with a stiff face. As soon as this sentence came out, the girl became obviously nervous. The boy smiled and said confidently, "What's there to be afraid of? Even our parents support our cause. How can the teacher interfere? My reputation is okay, not everyone knows me, but the strange thing is that you don't know me, and I don't know you either." The boy said something inexplicable, but Hope didn't quite understand the logic. What was so strange about it? Then he saw the boy put his hand into his clothes from his neck and took out the jade pendant hanging on his neck. The boy kept staring at Hope, as if observing something. Don't you know this jade pendant? The boy smiled slightly and asked Hope. At this moment, Hope didn't know that he had aroused the suspicion of the boy in front of him. Although he didn't know where the problem was, the other party was obviously testing his identity. It seemed that his identity should be exposed. Feeling that his identity was exposed, Hope felt relieved. He grinned at the boy and said casually, "I don't know, what is this?" There is no need to hide his identity anymore, that's easy to deal with. If it's exposed, just run away. What can these two little brats do to him? After leaving, he will use self-transformation to change his appearance and continue. Who is afraid of whom? That's interesting. You don't even know what this thing is. The boy smiled mysteriously, and it seemed that he was really pretending. Hope had already started to think in his mind. Since his identity was exposed, should he teach this little brat a lesson? Seeing the boy's smile, he suddenly thought of Malfoy, who showed off the snack sent by his family in the auditorium every day. His expression at that time was exactly the same as the boy in front of him now. Hope's mouth curled up, revealing a strange smile, and his eyes showed disdain without any concealment. You are pretending. Hope scolded unceremoniously. Maybe returning to his hometown stimulated his mother tongue. I can't stand pretending the most, right, the Riddler. The next moment, the stone road under the boy and girl's feet collapsed suddenly, and the two who didn't react fell directly. The two people's faces changed drastically. Just when they were about to make some moves, the soil on all sides turned to wrap around them. In an instant, the sunken soil was restored and the pit was repaired, leaving only the heads of the two people on the ground. The two looked at Hope in shock, not expecting that they were buried alive in an instant. What kind of magic is this? The boy asked in disbelief. This is the United College. What do you want to do? The professors won't let you go, the girl shouted calmly. United College? Hope only then knew the name of the school. It followed the old habits like the clothes, but it was somewhat incompatible with the word professor. Come on, keep smiling for me. Don't you like to smile? Hope ignored the girl, squatted down, looked at the boy's head and asked. Let me out if you dare. I want to duel with you. At this moment, the boy's face was very ugly, without a trace of smile, and he turned unwillingly and shouted loudly. If you have the ability, come out yourself. Hope said disdainfully, and flicked his right index finger, and a stream of water shot out, directly landing on the boy's face, splashing the boy's face. When the boy wanted to speak again, Hope continued to shoot out a stream of water, just to prevent him from speaking, which made the boy angry enough. After playing for a while, he stopped and asked, "How do you know I have a problem?" Hope really didn't know how he was exposed, but he guessed that he was still unfamiliar with some common sense here. "If you beg me, I will tell you." The boy was not convinced and said angrily. "Happy reading every day during the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, activity time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 45 Good Nephew. Hope couldn't help but shake his head. This kid really didn't know how high the sky was. The next moment, Hope reached into his suit, and when he took it out, there was a revolver in his hand. White ding weapons. The Ministry of Justice strictly prohibits white ding weapons from appearing in the magic world. Seeing what Hope had in his hand, the boy recognized it at once and shouted in surprise. Hope suddenly understood that the muggles here were called white ding, which was quite appropriate. Hope then put the muzzle of the gun against the boy's forehead, and the boy showed visible panic. Wait, we are relatives." The boy finally lost his arrogance and said anxiously. As if he was afraid that Hope would not believe him, the boy shouted again, "Your last name is Hua, right?" Hope's eyes flashed with astonishment when he heard it. This was not something that could be guessed by random nonsense. Seeing Hope's face, the boy breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that he was not wrong. "My last name is Hua, too. My name is Hua Bufan. The jade pendant just now is owned by everyone in the family. It is used to distinguish the distance of blood relationship and the status of the family. When it meets someone of the same family, it will heat up. The closer the blood relationship is to the main lineage, the hotter the jade pendant will be. The temperature of the jade pendant just now is the same as the temperature I felt on the second uncle, so you must be a member of our Hua family, and your blood relationship is similar to that of the second branch, but our Hua family will have such a jade pendant regardless of the main branch, so it is impossible not to recognize it." The boy seemed to be trying to save his life, fearing that the person in front of him would shoot if he spoke too late, and he said a lot in one breath. Hope understood it, but he didn't expect the problem to be here, but the family, the main branch, the direct branch, the collateral branch. Hope was a little dizzy after hearing it. But this is obviously an ancient tradition in his hometown. He couldn't help but be a little surprised. He didn't expect to meet relatives as soon as he stepped into the magic world here. "So, what kind of relative am I to you?" Hope continued to ask, and the muzzle of the gun on Hua Bufan's head did not move away. "I have seen people from the second and fourth rooms. You can only be from the third room." "The third room? I heard that there is only one bloodline left in the third room." "You should be that person. In terms of seniority, you are my uncle, but you can't be that old." Hua Bufan analyzed quickly, but his voice became smaller and smaller as he spoke. He began to doubt himself. When the child of the third room was born, he was already 2 or 3 years old. Hope's eyes flashed, and he was also shocked in his heart. He felt that things were already going to happen. "Which room are you from?" Hope couldn't help asking. In fact, although he was sure, he hadn't figured out the relationship. "I am naturally from the first room. My grandfather is the current head of the Hua family and the head of the Hua family. If you are really the bloodline of the third room, your father and my grandfather are brothers, and my grandfather is your uncle." Although Hope's mind was a little confused, Hua Bufan's words had helped him sort it out. But after hearing what Hua Bufan said, Hope suddenly had some doubts. "Patriarch? Are there so many people with the surname Hua?" Hope couldn't help asking. "Can a family produce so many wizards? And they have become a clan." "Of course, my Hua family has a history of thousands of years, and it has never been broken since ancient times. It is one of the 5 clans in the world." Speaking of this, Hua Bufan said proudly. "Since you are relatives, can you let us out first, and then talk?" At this time, the girl on the side interrupted timidly. "No hurry, since I am your uncle in terms of relationship, why are you so arrogant just now?" Hope waved his hand and asked immediately. Hua Bufan snorted coldly when he heard it. "Humph, I am the eldest wife. Besides, you." Hua Bufan said this with a proud face, but he seemed to remember something at the end. His face changed, and he quickly shut up. Hope smiled slightly, and heard that the unspoken words were the key points. Click. Hope directly turned the hammer behind the revolver, making a clear sound. What's more? Besides, your third room has been expelled from the Hua family. Strictly speaking, we are not relatives. Hua Bufan was frightened and shouted loudly. Hope frowned immediately. Expelled? Did you kill my father? Hope asked in a serious tone. Although Hanny had never told him about his father in this life, he had long guessed that the person should be gone. Of course, it is also possible that he abandoned his wife and children, but Hope had never felt Hanny's resentment. This sentence has already shown Hope's identity. Hua Bufan looked at Hope in disbelief when he heard this question. He was horrified and blurted out excitedly, "How is it possible? To remove the name means to remove the name from the family tree. Your father's death has nothing to do with us. My grandfather would go to your father's grave every New Year and other festivals. However, I don't know much about adults, and I don't know why the name was removed. Anyway, this matter is never discussed in our family." Hope's eyes flashed. Seeing Hua Bufan's excited face, it sounded like the truth. He nodded and said to himself, "So that's it. Now that the matter has been explained clearly, should I kill him? He saw that I was carrying a white-clad weapon. Who knows if he will go and report me?" Hua Bufan's eyes widened in an instant, and a trace of horror appeared in his eyes. "Kill? Kill him? I won't tell you. You're my uncle. I can't possibly tell on you," Hua Bufan said anxiously, fearing that he would be silenced if he spoke too slowly. The muzzle of the gun was still against his head. From what he had seen in Bai Ding's movies, he knew that his head would explode like a watermelon if he pulled the trigger. "Huh? Didn't you say that I'm not your uncle in a strict sense?" Hope asked in surprise. "No, you're my uncle. You're my real uncle. The family doesn't recognize you, but I definitely recognize you. Even if my grandfather comes, it won't help." Hua Bufan shouted from the bottom of his heart, his face swollen with anxiety. "Really? It seems that our blood is thicker than water." Hope smiled harmlessly, and then the revolver in his hand returned to its original state. "Look how scared you are. Haven't you learned transfiguration? Get up, my good nephew." Hope's mind moved, and the soil on the ground suddenly separated, lifting the two from the ground. He supported Hua Bufan and patted the mud on his legs casually, just like a good uncle. He fell on the fan and pulled it hard, and the fan was immediately taken off by him. "You!" Hua Bufan dared not to be angry, but from the means that Hope had just shown, he knew that they were not the two students who could deal with it. Hope casually looked at the fan in his hand, spread it out, and saw the landscape painting on the fan, and a red seal was printed. He searched all the treasures on the two people with the treasure perception and found that there was no magic wand, but this fan was a magic item. He had to suspect that this fan was a magic wand, but the style was a little special. Reading books every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now. Activity time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 46, The Terrifying Hua Family. Hope put his arm around Hua Bufan's shoulders affectionately, and turned his gaze to the nervous girl beside him. "Is this your girlfriend?" Hope asked casually. "Yes." Hua Bufan gritted his teeth and said. "She can't tell on us, or we." Hope made a swinging motion, scaring the girl back a step, and his eyes seemed to be a little moist. "She won't," Hua Bufan said hurriedly. "Huh, I'm kidding." "Then, you go back first, and your nephew will take me around. If she tells on us, I will take you away." Hope threatened secretly, but both the girl and Hua Bufan understood Hope's subtext. "You go back first. If the professor asks, just say I'm home. This is my uncle. There will be no problem." Hua Bufan looked at the worried girl and said. After the girl left, Hope let go of Hua Bufan's shoulders, spread out the fan, and fanned the air. "Let's go, tell me about the situation here. I'm a wanderer. Since you know my story, tell me what you know." Hope then strolled in the garden. The scenery was really amazing, worthy of being a royal garden. I heard my mother say by chance that after the third master died, the third grandmother took you away. Because the third master had been removed from the list, no one stopped them. Hua Bufan followed, looking helpless, and began to tell the story. Hope's eyes flashed, and it seemed that there was nothing wrong with this. You should be younger than me, how could you grow up like this? Did you use the variety potion? Hua Bufan couldn't help asking curiously. From Hua Bufan's mouth, Hope knew what the variety potion was, which was the compound decoction, but with a different name. That's right. Why don't you tell me about the Hua family? I heard that you said it was so powerful. Is it true? Hope used a flat attack and directly made Hua Bufan hand over his ultimate move. Of course it's great. Our Hua family is one of the top 5 surnames in the world. During the most prosperous period, the entire magic world had to listen to us. Then Hua Bufan began to tell the history of the Hua family, and even Hope was stunned. The Hua family originated more than 2,000 years ago. Since ancient times, it has been a big surname in the magic world. The inheritance has never been broken. When it was at its most prosperous, it really controlled half of the magic world. Unlike the West, the magic world in my hometown never pays attention to the pure blood theory. Instead, it encourages people to interact with ordinary people. This is why the Hua family has not been cut off for 2,000 years. Don't go for quality but quantity. Isn't the probability of wizards low? Then have more children. The probability of a Muggle child giving birth to a wizard is different from the probability of a wizard giving birth to a wizard and a wizard giving birth to a wizard and a Muggle. The ancestors of the Hua family have long discovered this truth. In the past, magic was regarded as a mysterious power given by God. In order to keep this power in the bloodline, they married wives, concubines, and had children. Just one person created a large number of wizards, and the results were terrifying. The children of the Hua ancestors were also the same. They kept marrying wives, concubines, and having children. They had a large number of wives and concubines, and a large number of children, including both wizards and Muggles. Of course, there were problems. After several generations, it was found that wizards could not be born. It seemed that the magic talent was constantly diverted with blood. Another ancestor set a rule that the wife of each wizard must be a wizard, so that the probability of wizards appearing was increased again. After several generations, the Hua family gradually developed into a large family, but only wizards could be included in the Hua family tree. In order to gather the power of the family, it is divided into the main vein and branch veins, the direct line and the collateral line. The main line direct line serves as the patriarch of the entire family and leads the entire magic family. This practice makes the Hua family a powerful force. It can be said that the whole village is full of wizards with the surname Hua, which can better protect themselves and hide themselves. Of course, wizards with other surnames are also welcome. Whether they marry into the family or marry into the family, they can be completely absorbed by the huge surname Hua as nutrients, making the Hua family more prosperous. How can those wild wizards born from the Muggle group fight against the wizards in the family group, especially in that era when they need to hold together for warmth? Once heresy is found, they will be killed and beaten. Basically, wild wizards will be absorbed by the family, and even their children will have the surname Hua. As for the Muggles in the family, no matter how close the relationship is, they can only be subordinates. In the old days when the patriarch held the power of life and death, who dared to report the patriarch? He would be beaten to death, and even the government would not care. Even if the matter was really leaked, at most the family wizards would be dispatched to erase the memory of the insider. However, such a long history is not without problems. During the most prosperous period of the Hua family, they controlled half of the magic world. The patriarch of the year was arrogant and attempted to control the mortal emperor. Eventually, the matter was exposed, which angered the emperor. He counted out 100,000 troops to encircle and destroy the 9 clans. There were also wizards with ulterior motives who led the army in secret, causing heavy casualties for the Hua family. In the end, they could only flee into the mountains. After years of secret development, they recovered some vitality. This is probably the history of the Hua family, which made Hope sigh that it was really awesome. There is no discrimination against pure-blooded and half-blooded people, but it is more pure. Power and status are supreme, and strength is supreme. No matter what, Muggle wizards will not be an obstacle to the family, so why should they be discriminated against? Not only should they not be discriminated against, but they should be included. Even if they are the main lineage, they are not really pure-blooded wizards. In history, the wife may not give birth to wizard children, so the position of the head of the family can only be inherited by the concubine. Of course, such a history is bound to have a fight for the throne, but it is only a minority. Most of them still follow the principle of primogeniture. Even if there is a fight for the throne, the Hua family will be the head of the family in the end, so there is no problem. TSK TSK TSK. Hope couldn't help but smack his lips. Such a family is much stronger than those pure-blood families in the West. At least in most of the time, when the patriarch's words are still counted, he can command a large group of wizards with a wave of his hand. Isn't this better than the Minister of Magic? And the main lineage can not only command the wizards of the family, but also control the property rights and clan learning. In ancient times, magic knowledge was not shared. Only wizards of the main lineage could learn all the magic knowledge. Others could only learn magic knowledge to a limited extent, and different degrees of magic knowledge were granted based on the distance of the relationship. This led to the power gap between the main lineage and the branch lineage, and between the direct lineage and the collateral lineage. Although some knowledge will be leaked out as the bloodline is marginalized, the only orthodoxy is always in the hands of the direct lineage. Reading books every day on the 11th. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now. Activity time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 47, The Remains of the Old Capital. There are only 5 families with such surnames that have been passed down to this day, and our Hua family is one of them. Hua Bufan said proudly. There are many families like theirs, but there are very few that can be passed down from thousands of years to the present. Since your Hua family has its own clan school, why did you go to this joint academy? It doesn't sound like the Hua family clan school. Hope keenly noticed something unusual. Hua Bufan's proud expression suddenly froze and collapsed when he heard it. Strictly speaking, this is also our clan school, but it is a college jointly organized by 4 other surnames. Our Hua family is also a member of the board of directors. It sounds like just a director, so which surname is in charge here? None of them. The dean of the academy is a wizard who was born in a common family. Hua Bufan said hesitantly, as if it was a shame for him to say this. Hope immediately stared at Hua Bufan with some suspicion. This sounded. It seemed to be different from the glory of the surname family he just mentioned. Hua Bufan glanced around to make sure no one was eavesdropping on them, and said in defense, although the dean was born a commoner, he is a rare genius in 1,000 years and the most powerful wizard today. At first, Hope thought the other party was talking about Dumbledore. More than 40 years ago, the dean appeared out of nowhere and led a group of common wizards to overwhelm the 5 clans, establish the Wizard Union, integrate the power of the entire magic world, and serve as the first president of the Wizard Union. Later, he asked the 5 major clans to hand over their clan schools, run schools in a unified manner, and share magic equally regardless of high or low status. Hua Bufan whispered mysteriously. Hope was a little surprised and interrupted. How come this is completely different from what you just said? Didn't you say that the clans are powerful? The combined power of the 5 clans can be overturned by a group of common wizards? In this case, he almost believed what he said just now. I also think it's impossible, but that's how it is. Hua Bufan said very aggrievedly. In fact, he still wants to understand how he was overturned, but this is a secret of the older generation, and he is not qualified to know. In Hua Bufan's narration, Hope also understood the situation of the magic world in his hometown. In short, the 5 clans are powerful, but they are ridden on the head by an ordinary wizard. Although they have been suppressing clan privileges for years and intending to equalize rights, they have not been wiped out. The 5 major clans still have considerable power in the magic world today. So your father will be the head of the Hua family in the future, what about you? Hope asked casually. It sounds like Huobufan is indeed of noble status, and he is the son of the future patriarch. I am the fifth child. Okay. After hearing what Huobufan said, Hope immediately knew that Huobufan's most noble status in the future would at most be the son of the patriarch, and the position of the head of the family had nothing to do with him. Okay, in that case, then take your uncle for a good walk. Are there any shops here? Hope didn't forget his original plan and put his arm around Huobufan's shoulders. Although Huobufan was so arrogant before, how could an uncle like him bother with a junior? There are none in the academy, there are some in the nearby old capital ruins. Huobufan was not used to being hugged by his uncle, who just wanted to silence him. His body twisted unconsciously, but Hope held him tightly and he couldn't struggle free. The old capital ruins is the gathering place of wizards located in the old palace. According to Huobufan, it was the most prosperous gathering place, gathering more than 10,000 wizards. The Wizarding Union is right there, and the Union has 4 departments, namely the Li, Gong, Civil and Criminal departments, which are integrated into the Ministry of Magic in his hometown. Hope nodded. If he went there, it would be easier, but coming here is not bad. At least there is one more relative. Even if it is only a blood relative, he can't do anything if the other person cries to recognize him. He looked down at his clothes. This outfit was obviously not suitable. With a thought, the clothes on his body changed immediately. In a blink of an eye, he was like Huobufan, wearing a gray long gown with another set of clothes inside. How did you do it? Huobufan couldn't help but widen his eyes when he saw this. Transfiguration, don't you teach it here? Hope answered casually. But you didn't recite the spell. Huobufan was puzzled and asked. Doesn't you teach silent casting without a wand here? Hope said with a puzzled look, feeling that this child was making a fuss. Huobufan blushed when he heard this, but he couldn't complain. Of course he knew, but this was transfiguration. It was not an ordinary spell. He had never heard of any students who could do it so easily. Besides, Hope was a few years younger than him. After changing his clothes, Hope was ready to go to the ruins of the old capital. He held Huobufan's arm with one hand, and the next moment, the 2 figures disappeared. Huobufan looked at everything in front of him blankly, a little confused. He naturally knew where this was. But how did he appear here all of a sudden from the United Academy? Could it be that he had just been cast with the forgetting spell and lost his memory? He stared at Hope with his eyes wide open and looked at him in disbelief. Was this really his cousin whom he had never met? At this moment, he had to suspect that the jade pendant in the family was damaged, otherwise it could not explain all this. How did you do it? The United Academy prohibits the magic of apparition. Huobufan asked a little in a lost voice. He was eager to know the answer, holding Hope's arm tightly with one hand. Maybe you teach differently from us. Hope casually perfunctorily said, but his eyes were sweeping around. This place seemed to maintain the old appearance, just like the old palace city. In the distance, there were tall palaces, but here was an ancient street, paved with bluestone, with old-style buildings on both sides, which seemed to be quite old. At first glance, I thought I had traveled to ancient times. There were many wizards walking on the street, but their uniforms were different from those of the students in the academy. Some wore Muggle clothes, and some wore silk clothes like the rich and noble people in ancient times. He was full of joy and immediately took Huobufan to stroll around. Soon he was dazzled. The things here were completely different from those in Diagon Alley. Even the wands were varied, and many of them were imitated from ancient styles. There were whisks, brushes, hair buns and even Zen sticks, which were all wands that could cast magic. In order to conceal their identities, ancient wizards naturally tried their best to make their wands into items that would not arouse suspicion and could be carried with them. I heard that many people at that time would pretend to be Taoist monks in order to carry their wands. But these are just for the sake of novelty, not practical. Huobufan directly acted as a tour guide. Looking at Hope's fussing look, he secretly despised him in his heart, but of course he didn't dare to show it. Have fun reading every day during the National Day. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 48 I'll help you. Hope looked at the women's hair buns with green beads and thought of using them as gifts, but then he thought that Hermione's hair would not be used, so he gave up the idea. Good nephew, this is the first time we meet, should we give each other a gift? Hope suddenly patted Huabuffan's shoulder affectionately and said. No need. Huabuffan suddenly felt obvious resistance in his heart. Their first meeting was not wonderful, and Hope was the third room expelled from the family. He didn't want to have anything to do with Hope. Why should we be so polite between uncle and nephew? The fan is good. Hope pointed to the paper fan spread out on the wall, on which was a picture of birds flying at sunset. I already have one, so this thing is unnecessary. Huabuffan immediately thought of the reason and said politely. But I don't have one. Hope smiled and said softly. Huabuffan was stunned instinctively when he heard this, then he reacted and pointed at himself in disbelief. You mean I'm giving you a gift? Of course, didn't you cry and admit that I was your uncle? It's not me, so what? Now you want to deny it. Hope said as a matter of course. Huabuffan gritted his teeth fiercely, looked at Hope with a red face, and finally took out the money to pay the bill. Hope noticed that the coin Huabuffan took out was the same as the ancient copper coin, but it was golden, so he thought it should be the magic coin from his hometown. Hope was very satisfied with the things, as if he had a new toy, and kept looking at it. According to Huabuffan, this fan can be used as a wand when closed, and it can resist the sudden attack of the spell when opened. Ordinary spells can be resisted, but slightly powerful spells can only be resisted once. As for the fire-type spells, they have no effect, and the real lethal spells are useless. Even so, Hope thought it was very good, at least the style was much better than that bare wand. And there was a green tassel at the end of the fan, which was very beautiful. When the fan was placed near the pants, the tassel would automatically tie up. Let's go, keep shopping. Having gained something, Hope was more interested in the next trip. Then they came to a flying broom shop. Of course, the name of this shop was not Flying Broom, but Hope saw the flying broom hanging inside when he passed by. I didn't expect that the magic world here also used flying brooms. I have never seen anyone use this thing. If you don't believe me, ask the boss and see how many of these things he has sold. Huabuffan looked at the flying broom and couldn't help but complain expressionlessly. If anyone in the academy used such a flying object, he would be ridiculed by others for life. I was just trying to find something new, but I didn't expect to be unable to sell any of them. Fortunately, I didn't buy many. The shop owner didn't get angry when he heard Huabuffan say that. Instead, he laughed and felt relieved. Hope looked at the other things in the shop again, his eyes sparkling. Unlike the British magic world, which only restricts one type of flying objects, there are all kinds of flying objects here. Hope reached out and grabbed a peachwood sword, took a deep breath, and this peachwood sword was also a flying device. He knew how to use it without Huabuffan's introduction. I'm afraid that the rumors of immortals in ancient times probably came from here, flying with swords. Hope was a little excited and a little disappointed when he didn't expect it to be magic. In addition to the peachwood sword, there are some other flying devices, such as a carriage, but it needs to be used with magical animals, and some prides, which have a large space inside, but the main feature is multi-person flight. There are also some personal chariots, but Hope is more interested in peachwood swords than others. In fact, peachwood swords are also more popular in the magic world. Huabuffan said that there are special sword riding competitions in the academy. And the same peachwood swords are also divided into high and low. The normal version of the peachwood sword is not surprising, but the more expensive peachwood sword has a shrinking spell and an anti-shrinking spell. When not in use, it can be shrunk and carried on the body, and thrown directly when needed. Compared with the peachwood sword with the shrinking spell, the normal version of the peachwood sword is nothing. Hope's eyes lit up, as if he saw a luxury car. How could he not be tempted? Hope patted Huabuffan's shoulder again affectionately, but Huabuffan, who had been observing Hope, had expected it and carefully avoided Hope's palm. Don't come, I don't have money for this thing. Huabuffan said with a vigilant face. This thing is not a magic wand, and it requires a lot of money. However, Hope didn't believe this sentence. The main lineage. The son of the future patriarch, the grandson of the current patriarch of the Hua family, actually said that he had no money. If the Hua family didn't even have money, who would have money? It's not that he didn't have money. He could always take out some money to exchange, but he felt that the exchange was a bit troublesome. The more important reason was that he didn't want to pay, so he wanted his dear nephew to spend money for him. In one sentence, his nephew will lose everything. Nonsense, you are the main branch of the Hua family, you must not say such things outside, otherwise others will think that the Hua family has fallen to the point where they can't even afford a peachwood sword. Hope directly added value to his beloved nephew. Don't you have a girlfriend? She is also my niece-in-law. We are still short of a meeting gift, but your uncle is still single now. Since ancient times, there has been no reason for single people to pay this money. She will have to give me a red envelope when she gets married. Hope advised earnestly, but Hua Bufan didn't intend to listen. He kept shaking his head, and his head was almost shaking off. Do you think I can snatch this peachwood sword and run away with my powerful apparition skills? As for you, I guess you can't run away. You, a descendant of the Hua family, will be arrested and wait for your father to pick you up. As for me, I have drunk the compound decoction now. When the effect of the medicine wears off, do you think they can find me? Seeing this, Hope could only use force and whispered in Hua Bufan's ear. Hua Bufan's face turned pale. Following Hope's voice, he imagined that he would have to stay and take the blame and be sent directly to the Ministry of Justice. This was nothing. With his status as the Hua family's main branch, he could just pay the money directly, but the key was that it would be unforgivable to lose the face of the Hua family. Boss, that peachwood sword. Hua Bufan could only accept his fate in the end and took out a jade pendant from his pocket, but it was not the one Hope had seen before. Seeing this, Hope couldn't help but giggle, hugged Hua Bufan affectionately, and gave him a sweet date. Don't worry, given our relationship, I will definitely help you if you want to compete with your elder brother for the position of head of the family. Not to mention your elder brother, I will also help you if you want to compete with your father for the position of head of the family. You will definitely not lose out if you recognize me as your uncle. Hope promised solemnly. Have fun reading every day during the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, activity time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 49, Extinction. Hua Bufan looked at Hope in horror. If anyone heard this, he would beat his father to death. I don't need it. Don't talk nonsense. Hua Bufan said hurriedly. Hope raised his eyebrows and gave Hua Bufan a look. I understand. You want to surprise everyone quietly. Hua Bufan's eyes suddenly became more frightened. He really had no idea for a moment. He dared to continue to say something, but saw the boss coming over with a peachwood sword. He immediately closed his mouth for fear of being heard. The boss handed over the sandalwood box containing the peachwood sword with a flattering look, and returned the jade pendant together. It turned out to be the son of the Hua family. According to the rules, I gave you a 30% discount. Hua Bufan was about to take the jade pendant, and saw a hand taking the jade pendant one step ahead of him. Without looking, Hua Bufan knew whose hand this was, and a trace of helplessness appeared on his face. Can this thing be discounted? Hope said with a look of surprise. This is a good thing. Not only that, he didn't see Hua Bufan take out money, which means that this thing can also be used as money. My Hua family is famous for making things. All the tool stores in the magic world have members of my Hua family, so we can get discounts. It's useless for you to take this thing. The clan will pay after checking that it is correct. If an outsider takes it and pays for it outside, the clan will directly report it to the Ministry of Justice. Alas! When my dad knows that I have spent such a sum of money, he will definitely beat me up. Hua Bufan explained helplessly. This time he didn't look so arrogant, but looked depressed. Hope couldn't help but take a breath of cold air when he heard it. This time he really felt the arrogance of the Hua family, the tyrant of the magic world. He was even more curious in his heart. With money and people, how did someone turn the tables back then? If he didn't have a system, he might have snatched the inheritance right regardless of his status of being removed from the list, so that he would have no worries for the rest of his life. But then again, without the system, what can his little arms and legs do to fight against a big family? I'm just taking a look. Hope laughed, not feeling embarrassed at all, and threw the jade pendant in his hand back to Hwabufan. Then he picked up the long sandalwood box with a face full of joy and expectation, holding it carefully as if he had a new toy. Of course, he knew that the British magic world would definitely prohibit such flying equipment, but he didn't care about that. Then he continued to pull Hwabufan around the street with the wooden box in his arms. Hwabufan had already accepted his fate and knew that he was the uncle's money bag for the time being. Hope finally found something suitable as a gift. He found it in an alchemy shop. It was a fountain pen, of course not just an ordinary fountain pen, but with magic power, which could write according to the user's thoughts. The British magic world seemed to have the same thing. Of course, the main function of this fountain pen was just to free up the right hand without having to write by himself. Hope thought about it and bought 5 directly. Anyway, it was also the small treasury of his dear nephew. It was almost dusk when they were shopping. Hwabufan, who was standing by, was bored and seemed to hate shopping. Just as Hope was about to end his shopping trip, he suddenly found a store in a remote corner that seemed to have some magic materials. At this moment, he realized that he had been shopping for so long but had never seen a store that directly sold magic materials. He immediately asked the tour guide Hwabufan. "It's normal. These things are monopolized by the 5 major families. It's more profitable to sell them as finished products. If you want to open a store, you just need to purchase from us. If you really want to make them yourself, the price will only be higher than ours, not lower." Hwabufan said as if it was a matter of course. After thinking about it, Hope also felt that there was some truth. For example, the Hwa family basically controlled all the utensil stores. If there were real competitors, they could easily squeeze them out. It was a complete monopoly business. Hope looked at Hwabufan on the side with a flickering look in his eyes. It was a monopoly business. The family's treasury was probably full. In the magic world, it could be said that they were rich enough to rival a country. If he was asked to grab the position of the Hwa family heir himself, he would find it troublesome. After all, he had been removed from the family tree. It would be very troublesome to re-enter the family tree. In the end, he would have to fight for the throne. How could it be faster than stealing? But if he directly supported an heir, he wouldn't even have to steal. If he wanted money, he could just take it. Wouldn't his dear nephew give it to him? Hwabufan looked at Hope's eyes and trembled in his heart. He instinctively felt that Hope was up to something bad. Was he going to buy something expensive again? Hope was just joking before, but now he really had this idea. "Don't worry, one day you will find how much your efforts today will pay off." Hope patted Hwabufan on the shoulder and said with emotion. "No need." Hwabufan quickly refused. He just hoped that this little money could send this old man away. "Since it is a monopoly business, what's the matter with this store?" Hope asked. "That's the Bai family's store. It mainly collects materials. Selling materials is just a byproduct, but there won't be many good goods." Hwabufan is obviously very familiar with this place. Bai family? It sounds like one of the 5 major surnames. The Bai family mainly grows magical herbs and breeds some magical creatures, and sells materials. When the family needs them, they purchase directly from the Bai family, but they won't take out the real good stuff. It is said that there are real dragon remains in their clan library, but I don't know whether it is true or not. Real dragon? Hope frowned and asked in surprise. Yes, real dragon. The legendary magical creature, but it is just a legend. Although there have been rumors, no one has ever seen it, and no one has ever seen it in the Hwa family's 2,000-year history. It's just that the ancestors of the Hwa family clearly stated that real dragons do exist, and they have seen the remains of a real dragon with their own eyes, but they have no chance to get it. Hwabufan said with emotion. If it weren't for the clan records, they would only think it was a fabrication. But no matter which family it is, people are very sure that real dragons have long been extinct in history, and even the time of extinction is longer than the history of each family. If real dragons are still alive, how can those pseudo-dragons in the West be qualified to be called dragons? Hope's breathing became inexplicably rapid. Real dragons. It turns out that they existed in history, and there are even remains. I don't know what characteristics will be obtained after the fusion. Where is the Bai-family library? Hope's voice was a little hoarse, which scared Huobufan directly. He looked around. Fortunately, there was no one around and no one heard what Hope said. Don't talk nonsense. People will think that this is a provocation to the Bai family. It will cause a big trouble. Huobufan whispered. It takes a lot of effort to find out the family library of a big family. Read books every day during the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, activity time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 50, Missing Knowledge. Then where do you think it might be? Hope said reluctantly, with a firm look in his eyes, as if he had to ask for the answer. Huobufan hesitated a little, thought about it and said in a low voice, there may not be only one family treasury, especially for storing more valuable things, even ordinary family members don't know. If there is such a thing. I mean if, then only each head of the family knows it. It may be near their family residence, but it is possible to be anywhere. This is just his personal speculation. God knows where the Bai family treasury will be stored. At some point, the family treasury will even become a trump card for a family to turn the tables. It is possible to let others know, and those who know will not betray the family. Hope frowned slightly. It made sense to listen to it. Perhaps this kind of family treasury will cast magic such as the loyalty spell. Then where is their residence? Hope continued to ask. Huobufan was a little frightened, feeling that Hope had made up his mind. He didn't think Hope would succeed, but in a flash, Hope was not from their family. Even if he caused trouble, it had nothing to do with them. Their family's base is in the Poison Bee Valley in the southwest. I heard that there are poisonous bees that bite people near this valley. Bai Ding didn't dare to get close. He used to hide himself because of this. Huobufan said in a low voice, paying attention to the surroundings from time to time to make sure no one was eavesdropping. Hope nodded secretly and kept this in mind. With the approximate location, the rest depends on the treasure perception to find it slowly. He doesn't think that magic such as the loyalty curse can block his treasure perception. Of course, he didn't use treasure perception, but he had already used it. He scanned all the places in his hometown directly. At least he didn't find the remains that looked like a real dragon. The rest can only be identified slowly according to the size of the fluorescence, which is estimated to take a certain amount of time. If the Bai family's treasure house is not in the southwest, then the range is too large. Hope then took Huobufan to visit the Bai family shop. As Huobufan said, there were no high-end goods, but he found that most of the magic materials here were not available in the West, and he had never even heard of them. Hope looked at a half-yellowed nail in a glass jar, and then looked at Huobufan. This is a zombie's nail, which can be used to make detoxification potion. Huobufan took a look and identified it carefully. Zombie? Hope's voice was a little louder. Of course he had heard of zombies, but they actually existed. Huobufan looked at Hope's ignorant look, and couldn't help but curl his lips and gave Hope a popular science. A dangerous humanoid magical creature with a deadly poison in its body. If it is bitten for a period of time and not treated in time, it will be assimilated into a zombie and cannot be reversed. A long time ago, the toxins in this creature could not be cracked, but now there is an antidote, which is their nails. As long as you drink the antidote in time, there will be no problem. They usually like to find a place to sleep underground, which is very rare. Hope opened his mouth slightly, feeling that he had learned something new. It sounded a bit similar to a werewolf, but he thought about it for a moment and felt that this magical creature did not seem to be suitable for fusion. The scales of the mermaid. The teeth of the tengu. Hope finally realized his own knowledge and its insufficiency, especially about magical animals. What he knew before was from textbooks or things in his previous life, and he had very little knowledge about magical animals in his hometown. However, as Huobufan said, this shop was only used by the Bai family to collect materials, so there were not many things. But Hope still waved his hand and bought everything directly. Huobufan was already used to it. The big head had already been paid, and he didn't care about these small amounts of money. Hope stuffed all these things into his purse, intending to study them slowly after returning. The most urgent thing now is that he needs to expand his knowledge about magical animals in his hometown, and then asked Huobufan, "Where is the bookstore? I want to buy a book about magical creatures." However, Huobufan's next sentence directly shocked Hope. "We don't have a bookstore here." Hope looked at Huobufan with a puzzled look. "What is this? Knowledge has been a valuable asset since ancient times. Before the United Academy, knowledge was monopolized by the clan. Today, there has been a change, but only in the academy. If you want to learn knowledge, you have to study hard and pass the examination to learn more advanced knowledge, so that students can understand that knowledge is hard-won. This is the concept upheld by the dean. Of course, the descendants of the main line of the family naturally have privileges. After all, the United Academy relies entirely on the support of our clan school, but your third house has been expelled." Huobufan said calmly, and did not think there was anything wrong with it. Hope stared at Huobufan closely, as if he was thinking of something. "You don't need to look at me. It's useless to look at me. Most of the knowledge of the clan is copied to the library of the academy. It has been completely sealed and hidden in the clan library. As children of the family, we have to go to the library of the academy to learn knowledge on weekdays. Of course, you can use the library, but don't blame me for not reminding you that the dean's office is upstairs in the library." Huobufan guessed Hope's idea at once. In fact, it was easy to guess. From the beginning to now, Huobufan probably knew what kind of person Hope was. A bold, fearless and strange man. Hope couldn't help but smack his lips. It was really done, but it was not impossible to sneak in quietly, but this matter was not urgent, and he didn't have to look at it at this time. At least wait until the fusion position is vacant. Seeing that night had fallen, the lanterns hanging outside the shops on both sides naturally lit up, illuminating the surroundings and dispelling most of the darkness. Hope was also ready to leave, looking at Huobufan, showing a bright smile. "What do you mean, I'm ready to leave? Do you want to visit me?" "No thanks." Huobufan refused without hesitation. "Really?" Hope showed a sinister smile, put one hand on Huobufan's shoulder, and before he could react, he took him away the next moment. In a blink of an eye, Huobufan had already appeared in another place. He had time to react at this time, but found that this was actually the United Academy. When he turned around, the figure had disappeared, and he was the only one left. Back to the academy, Huobufan did not move immediately, but stood there in a daze. Everything today was a bit too psychedelic for him. Even after experiencing it once, he still felt a little incredible. Could the apparition magic in other places break the anti-apparition magic of the United Academy? You have to know that the most powerful head of the family, that is, his grandfather, has to honestly walk through the main gate when he comes here. Reading books every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 to get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, activity time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 51 Changes. Hope returned to Hogwarts with a lot of harvest. It felt like a long time had passed. However, after returning, he found that it was only noon here, just lunch time. There was no one in the dormitory at this time. I think everyone had gone to the hall to eat. Hope also walked to the hall. As soon as he arrived at the hall, he saw Harry and his friends smiling, especially Ron, with a red face and his head held high like a rooster. "What's wrong?" Hope sat down next to them and asked with a little confusion. Hope, you are too late. You didn't see how ugly Malfoy's face was just now," Ron said excitedly, ignoring the half-chewed food in his mouth. Hope was relieved to avoid Ron's spray. Only then did he know that it was because of what he scared Malfoy yesterday. Malfoy was seen being dragged away by Crabbe and Goyle in a panic, and most people in Hogwarts knew it in a blink of an eye. As expected, Harry and Ron just mentioned it, and before they really started to mock, Malfoy's face turned black. The key point was that he couldn't retaliate, and he left without eating. Hope also laughed with Harry and the others. Just by listening, you can tell how ugly Malfoy's face was. Finally, he was no longer arrogant. After lunch, Harry had Quidditch training, and Ron went to watch it when he was free, without any intention of doing homework. Hope thought about it, and it seemed that he didn't see Hermione just now. Could it be that she was still angry? He just returned to the Gryffindor common room and ran into Hermione coming down the spiral staircase. At this time, there was almost no one in the hall. Did Hermione deliberately avoid them? Seeing Hope, Hermione snorted coldly, turned her head to the side proudly, and continued to walk forward, as if she didn't intend to say hello to him. Hope was a little amused and helpless. He didn't expect Hermione to really blame him. This angry look was quite cute. He naturally wouldn't fight with a little girl. He suppressed his smile and walked quickly to Hermione and stopped her. "Hey, you seem to have become stupid after not seeing you for a few days. You don't even recognize me. Do you need me to take you to the school hospital? I'm happy to help." Hope teased directly, successfully angering Hermione. "You are stupid." Hearing Hope say this, Hermione immediately counterattacked. "Well, if you are angry about what Ron said a few days ago, I can apologize for him, if you accept it." Hope said it slightly seriously, but he just took himself out of it at once. He was not apologizing for himself. "No," Hermione said firmly, bypassing Hope and continued to move forward. Hope turned and followed, walking together. "Well, I understand, after all, what Ron said was a bit too much." Hope immediately stood on Hermione's side and criticized Ron, but Hermione did not respond. "Hiss, you're not angry with me, are you? The Hermione I know won't take her anger out on someone else because of someone else's business." Hope took a breath and exaggeratedly, as if she had just discovered the truth. Hermione stopped immediately and looked at Hope seriously and said, "I'm not angry with you, I just don't want you to think I'm meddling in other people's business." "I don't think so, you must be talking about someone else." Hope immediately shook her head and denied it. "Then do you think I'm meddling in other people's business by not letting you go to Hogsmeade Village?" "Not at all." Hope followed Hermione's words completely, without any hesitation. "Will you sneak out to Hogsmeade again in the future?" Hermione continued to ask. "You are wrong. Have you ever seen me sneak out? If you haven't seen me, how can you say I sneak out?" Hope blinked and asked back. "You?" Hermione was speechless for a moment, knowing that Hope was quibbling, and continued to walk around Hope towards the hall. But after the interruption just now, the relationship between Hope and Hermione has eased a lot. At least when Hope spoke, she didn't ignore him. Hope returned to the hall and sat next to Hermione. He lowered his head slightly, reached into his purse with one hand, fumbled for a while, and found a wooden box from it, took it out and put it on the table. "This is a gift I specially gave you, as a thank you for tutoring me to complete my homework before," Hope said sincerely. Hermione's eyes immediately swept towards the box. This was the first time a wizard gave her a gift. "No need, I just don't want you to lose points for not finishing your homework," Hermione still said stubbornly. "Of course I know your painstaking efforts, but this is specially selected for my friends. Harry and Ron also have it, and it is especially suitable for you. Are you sure you don't want it?" Hermione's eyes fell back on the wooden box when she heard it. "Even Ron has it, why shouldn't she want it?" I opened the wooden box and found that it was a fountain pen. I couldn't help but look at Hope with some doubts. "This is not an ordinary fountain pen. It will write the words you want as you think," Hope explained immediately. Hermione looked at the fountain pen in surprise. In this way, she didn't have to get sore fingers from taking too many notes. "Of course, it needs to be filled with ink. You should know how to do it," Hope reminded. Hermione couldn't let go of the pen. She solemnly put it back into the wooden box, turned to look at Hope, her eyes slightly shining, and said seriously, "I am very satisfied with your gift, thank you." Hope smiled slightly, shrugged, and said casually, "Then in the afternoon." "Okay, but I have a condition." You can't lend your homework to Harry and Ron. In any form. I know you secretly circumvented my previous condition that you don't lend your homework. Hermione instantly understood what Hope meant and agreed directly. No problem. Hope agreed without hesitation. It seems that Harry and his friends are worried now. They have offended the only academic bully in the college who would lend them homework. They don't want to apologize and go out to play. This is going to be a pain. Just when Hope was about to leave, Hermione suddenly said, "You said you didn't sneak out. You should have bought this pen outside." Hope looked at Hermione in shock. He didn't expect her obsession to be so deep. Well. But I still thank you very much, thank you for taking the initiative to reconcile with me, otherwise I would have lost a sincere friend. However, before Hope could speak, Hermione said seriously with a stern face, and he seemed to see a hint of gratitude in Hermione's eyes. Hope was slightly stunned, and the next second a sincere smile appeared on his face, and it felt that Hermione at this moment was different from before. Reading is fun every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, event time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 52 50 points. Hope returned to the dormitory first, and could not wait to reach into his purse with one hand, and took out a long wooden box from the palm-sized purse, and placed it on the only table in the middle of the dormitory. He opened the lid on top, and a beautiful peachwood sword lay quietly inside, with a piece of yellow silk cloth underneath. He took out the peachwood sword and carefully placed it on the ground. This is actually the same principle as the flying broom. Hope shouted softly, "Get up!" The next moment, the peachwood sword floated up directly, 5 or 6 centimeters above the ground. This is not related to any language, but the influence of the wizard's emotions and magic, which made the peachwood sword sense it. Hope's eyes lit up slightly, and he came to the side of the peachwood sword with great interest. He first raised his right foot and stood on it, causing the peachwood sword to sink slightly, but it bore his weight. Then he kicked his foot, and his left foot also stepped up, and the whole person stood directly on the suspended peachwood sword. It was his first time to fly a sword, so he instinctively shook his body to keep his balance. In the end, he found that his feet were firmly attached to the sword, as if walking on flat ground, and there was no instability in the center of gravity. A trace of excitement appeared on his face. The first step was successful. The next step was to control the peachwood sword. As Hope's mind moved, the peachwood sword suddenly rushed out at a very fast speed, like a car refueling. In just a moment, a plop was heard, and then Hope had fallen under the wall of the dormitory. Hope sat up quickly, ignoring everything else, and turned to look at the peachwood sword on the ground. Seeing that there was no damage, he was relieved. As for him, there was no problem. Even if he hit the wall heavily, he didn't feel anything. If Hope had a flying broom at home, he would know a truth: don't play with flying brooms at home, and the same goes for peachwood swords. The space here is obviously not suitable for him to try flying a sword. After thinking about it, he can only give up temporarily and prepare to find another time to practice. This thing cannot be seen in the light for the time being. Hope immediately stretched out his hand, and the peachwood sword flew into his hand. It quickly shrank under Hope's eyes and turned into a small sword of 4 or 5 centimeters. At first glance, it looked like a toy. After putting away the peachwood sword, he turned to look at the fan hidden under the wizard robe at his waist. It is not a bad thing to have an extra wand like this on his body. Maybe it can be used in an emergency at some point. Even if it is not a wand, it can be used as a decoration. Sure enough, it has to be the hometown. The aesthetics are much better than those in the British magic world. Then Hope took the homework out and found Hermione. Under Hermione's guidance, he quickly completed the homework. After having the magic pen, he didn't even need to do it. Sure enough, magic changes life. Almost before dinner, he had finished all the homework and returned to the dormitory with satisfaction. He found that several people had returned. "Hope, have you finished your homework?" Hope had just returned to the dormitory when Harry and the others looked from him to the parchment with full words in his hand, and couldn't help asking. After playing all day, they finally remembered that they still had homework to do when they returned to the dormitory. They were worried when they saw Hope coming back. Yes, but unfortunately, Hermione is still angry. When she was tutoring me on my homework, she specifically told me not to lend you my homework in any form, so. Hope shrugged, looking helpless. 3 pairs of shining eyes suddenly dimmed, and even Ron stopped asking for homework. After all, the root of the matter was with him. I think if you can apologize, maybe Hermione will be soft-hearted, and you still have a chance to finish your homework before curfew. Hope still pointed out a clear way for them, otherwise the whole Gryffindor would have to suffer Snape's weirdness together during the potions class. Harry and the others felt that it made sense and prepared to go out. Before leaving, Hope also gave away the magic pens, at least so that they could finish their homework faster. At dinner time, Hope came to the auditorium alone and found that Harry and the others were not there, and they should still be with Hermione. The auditorium was full of students, but the professors didn't know what they were busy with, and there was no one in the professor's seat. Hope looked at the empty professor's seat, and then glanced at the noisy auditorium, and suddenly an idea came to his mind. His exclusive task of fusing boggets requires 2,000 progress, which is not a small number. If there are only a few people playing pranks each time, it will take a long time. The simplest way is to choose a prank occasion. As long as he is in a crowded place, more people will be affected, and his task can be completed faster. Look here again, all the students of Hogwarts add up to about 300 people, especially in the hall for breakfast, lunch and dinner. Theoretically, he only needs to play pranks in the hall 6 to 10 times to complete this exclusive task. It's quite easy to think so. As for how to play pranks, Hope probably has the answer in his mind. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He left without eating a few bites. Anyway, he will go back to the Magic City to eat mutton later. Not long after Hope left, Harry and the others came in together, with Hermione beside him. It seems that they seem to have reconciled. Not long after they came in, Snape also came in, with a gloomy face as always, and glanced at Harry and the others, making Harry and the others feel unlucky. Snape walked all the way to the professor's seat and sat down, but he didn't eat. Instead, he looked at the students in the auditorium with a gloomy face. The atmosphere in the auditorium suddenly became a little cold. This feeling of being stared at by a venomous snake while eating was like waiting for them to eat and become fatter before the venomous snake opened its mouth to swallow them all. What is he crazy about again? Harry secretly complained to Ron and Hermione. He was very sensitive to Snape's eyes and felt that Snape was spying on this side. However, just after Harry complained about this, Snape stood up and went straight to the Gryffindor table. Damn, he won't hear it. Harry was a little panicked, and Ron and the others were the same. Is this what your dean taught you? You are so noisy when eating. Do you have one more mouth than others? One mouth to eat, and the other mouth to utter useless nonsense. Snape directly made trouble for the entire Gryffindor, and the people from other colleges immediately watched the excitement, and the students on the Slytherin side almost laughed their faces off. After all, although Snape was often teased by others in private, his authority as a professor was unquestionable. No one in Gryffindor stood up to refute. Gryffindor is deducted 50 points. Snape seemed dissatisfied and continued to speak ruthlessly. The whole hall fell into complete silence in an instant, so quiet that even a silver needle falling to the ground could be heard. All the students in Gryffindor looked at Snape with unbelievable eyes, and for a moment they thought they had heard it wrong. Thanks to the lazy doll boss for the monthly ticket. Reading books every day on the 11th. Recharge 100 to get 500 VIP points. Recharge now, activity time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 53 Harry takes on everything. The students from other colleges were also like this, looking at each other in bewilderment. 50 points. The Gryffindor students widened their eyes and opened their mouths so wide that they could almost swallow an egg. Their faces were full of disbelief. This was too much. The senior Gryffindor students who had been enduring Snape's scolding before could no longer hold back and wanted to stand up, but Snape turned to look at the other side, at the table of Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff, and said coldly, "You too." Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were also deducted 50 points. The senior Gryffindor students who wanted to say something just now were shocked again at this time. I wonder what medicine Snape took today to deduct 50 points from 3 colleges in a row. Is he crazy? Even if he wants to favor his own college, there should be a limit. And the Slytherins who should have been happy were also looking at each other in bewilderment at this time. This seemed a little too obvious. However, Snape did not seem to want to give up, and turned to look at the Slytherin table. At this moment, the Slytherin students instinctively felt uneasy, as if they had a premonition of something. And you? As a student of Slytherin, you are like other colleges, and you have disgraced Slytherin and shamed me, the dean. Snape also coldly scolded his own college. This time it was the turn of the students from other colleges to look at each other, and the anger just now was temporarily extinguished, and they looked at the quarterhouse with curiosity. I declare that Slytherin will be deducted 100 points. After announcing this decision, some Slytherin students stood up and wanted to refute something, but they slowly sat down under Snape's venomous eyes. Obviously, His Majesty was not only aimed at other colleges. Then Snape snorted coldly and slowly left the hall with a gloomy face. After Snape left, the whole hall exploded instantly, and people talked wildly left and right, discussing what medicine Snape had taken wrong. The Gryffindor students, who were originally very angry, were now beaming with joy, and were just about to celebrate with the cup. The anger just now dissipated instantly when they heard the decision of Slytherin to deduct points. If everyone deducted points, it was equivalent to no deduction. But everyone was deducted 50 points, except Slytherin, which was deducted 100 points. This was equivalent to no deductions, only Slytherin was deducted 50 points. What else could they be dissatisfied with, especially since it was Snape, the Dean of Slytherin, who personally deducted points? This was more exciting than winning a Quidditch game. This is the first time I've been so happy to be scolded by Snape. Harry's face was full of excitement, and he happily said to Ron and Hermione. Don't you think Snape is a little strange? Hermione asked with some doubts, although she also showed a smile on her face. I know the reason. He must have messed up his brain when brewing potions, but I like this Snape more. Ron said excitedly immediately. Snape walked out of the hall and disappeared after a few steps. He reappeared in a dormitory in the Gryffindor common room. In a blink of an eye, his body suddenly shrank and turned into a short-haired Oriental boy. The Snape just now was naturally Hope's transformed, and the real Snape was now in the basement of the castle, looking for the figure of the eight-eyed giant spider. Seeing the progress of the fusion of the Boggart soar by more than 200 points, Hope felt indescribably happy. In fact, he had been very restrained. After all, it was his first performance, so he was still conservative. It's not that he didn't think about stripping in the hall, of course, it was just a thought. He could also change himself into a woman's dress and walk in the hall, which would definitely refresh the student's stereotyped impression of Snape and restore Snape's vicious image. Such pranks will eventually be discovered, but as long as they are not caught, it is not a big problem. Hope didn't intend to end it. He used his self-transfiguration ability to transform again. The next moment, he transformed into Professor McGonagall, who looked serious and wore old-fashioned reading glasses. Then he used apparition and appeared outside the auditorium again. Hearing the noisy sounds inside, Hope couldn't help but smile, but soon he restrained his smile and showed an old-fashioned and majestic face. Then he slowly walked into the auditorium, stopped at the door, and silently watched the situation inside the auditorium. Some students had already noticed Professor McGonagall's arrival, and pulled the people next to them, secretly reminding them. Gradually, the entire hall returned to calm. Seeing this, Hope moved towards the professor's seat, seemingly unaware of what had happened. When he reached the end of the table, the red-haired Fred and George stood up and told him about Snape's series of actions just now. Nonsense, Severus is too much, the school points are not a joke, Severus's decision to deduct points just now will not count. Professor McGonagall rarely got angry, and her voice echoed in the hall, trying to make every student hear it. Hearing this, Harry and the others couldn't help but feel a little regretful, but they obviously had expected it. After all, Snape's brain was broken, how could such a deduction be taken seriously? Hogwarts doesn't need such a frivolous professor. I will tell Dumbledore to dismiss Snape and choose a new dean for Slytherin." Professor McGonagall turned and continued, and the whole hall was silent again. Silence fell, and everyone looked at each other in bewilderment. No one expected that the matter would become so serious that Snape would be dismissed directly. But, this was a great thing for the students of the other 3 colleges. In an instant, many students were stunned by this sudden surprise and felt a little dizzy. Then Professor McGonagall hurriedly left the hall, as if she was really going to find Dumbledore. "I'm not dreaming, am I?" Harry asked in disbelief. "This is real." Ron jumped up from his chair happily and shouted. When Hope walked out of the hall, he heard the sound of the hall about to the cheers that shook the roof. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Just as he was about to apparate away, his face changed slightly, and he saw Snape appear from the corner and walk towards him. Hope instantly restrained his expression, and returned to a solemn and dignified look, but there was a trace of hesitation in his heart. The Snape who was walking towards him could not be his disguise, but the real one. In fact, even if Hope felt that his self-transfiguration had few flaws, it was obviously not enough to pretend to be someone. This was also the reason why he chose this time. There was no professor in the auditorium, so it greatly reduced the number of people on the spot. Possibility of being exposed. In the end, Hope gave up the idea of using apparition to leave directly, stopped immediately, and nodded to Snape who was walking towards him. "Severus." Snape also nodded to him, and Hope continued to walk, but when he walked past Snape, he was alert to the fullest, always careful of the evil curse that Snape might shoot at him at any time. "Professor McGonagall." Suddenly Snape stopped and shouted at him. Hope paused. Songning turned around and looked at Snape. "I didn't find any traces of the acromantula. I will continue to look for it with Filch tonight." Snape still had a sullen face even when facing Professor McGonagall, the Vice-Chancellor. It turned out that everyone owed him money. "Thank you for your hard work," Hope said very concisely and nodded without showing any expression, which was in line with Professor McGonagall's image. He believed in the idea that the more you talk, the more mistakes you make, and Snape did not find anything unusual in these 3 short words, and turned around and walked towards the hall. Hope stood there and stared at Snape's back for a few seconds, then turned around and left. As soon as he turned the corner, he used apparition to return to the dormitory. Before he had planned to pretend to be Dumbledore and perform in the auditorium again, announcing Snape's dismissal on the spot to earn another wave of progress points, but Snape had already arrived, so this idea had to be abandoned temporarily. Looking at the system, after 2 waves of operations, he had gained more than 500 progress points, and was only 3/4 away from complete integration. He came to the table and put away the wand on the table. Just in case, he didn't bring his wand with him. After all, he knew the existence of the trace. The trace is a means of the Ministry of Magic, used to detect whether Xiao Wanger used magic outside the school. Of course, he couldn't be sure that the trace was in the wand, but he speculated that the trace was most likely a magic attached to the wand. Because he was sure that he had never met a member of the Ministry of Magic, and it was impossible for the Ministry of Magic to secretly cast magic on him without knowing it. But this trace magic can be generally used to detect students. The only flaw that may be cast with the trace magic is the wand. Basically, all freshmen will buy wands before entering school. It is impossible for wizards to be without wands, so the Ministry of Magic only needs to cast spells on the wands, and let Ollivander of Ollivander's wand shop cooperate to cast the trace magic. This is the only way to cast the trace magic on all students without contacting them. Of course, there are exceptions. For example, Ron's wand was not bought from a wand shop, but this is indeed a very rare situation. A normal family would not even save money on the wand of their children. After all, the wand requires matching. But there was no such saying in his hometown. At least when he bought the fan, no one said anything weird like Ollivander. Hope could only attribute it to the difference in skills in different regions. On the other side, after Snape and Hope pretended to be Professor McGonagall finished talking, they went straight to the hall. Of course, they were here to eat at this time. Before he reached the door, he heard a huge noise coming from inside, as if there was a party. His face suddenly darkened. "What are you arguing about?" Snape cast a sound-amplifying spell without a sound or a wand, and the sound spread throughout the hall. All the students in the hall turned their heads and looked at Snape. They fell into silence, but the excitement and ruddy on their faces remained. Potter, who taught you to shout while eating? Gryffindor will be deducted 5 points. The real Snape pointed directly at Harry as soon as he opened his mouth, as if there was no one else in his eyes. Harry's face suddenly froze, and the anger accumulated in his heart burst out at this moment with the disappearance of Snape's imminent dismissal. You don't have this power, Professor Snape. Harry raised his head, looked at Snape firmly, and said loudly with a red neck. At this moment, Snape's eyes suddenly showed a trace of astonishment and disbelief. Harry Potter dared to talk to him like this? Who gave him the courage? If Hope saw this scene now, he would also admire Harry for being a true Gryffindor. This wave of courage was really against the sky. Of course, he would not think it was his fault. After all, he just said that he would let Dumbledore dismiss Snape, which did not mean that Snape would really be dismissed. Even if he took a step back, Snape was still a professor now. Very good, Harry Potter, you seem to have more courage than your useless father to speak to 10 professors like this. Snape's face showed a trace of anger at this moment, and he gritted his teeth and said sarcastically, You shouldn't say that about my father. Harry was touched at this moment, and he shouted loudly. Humph. Very good, very good. Because of Mr. Potter's behavior, Gryffindor was deducted 10 points again. At the same time, you have to come to my office for detention every day after class for the next month. Until you learn how to respect a professor. Snape was so angry that his face rarely showed a trace of blood. He said loudly in a deep voice, and the sound of the sound amplification spell was applied to it was like a huge bell, exploding in the entire auditorium. However, Harry obviously did not realize the seriousness of the problem, and continued to be stubborn with disdain. No. You don't have the power. Professor McGonagall said that Dumbledore will dismiss you and you will no longer be a professor at Hogwarts, so I don't need to respect someone who slanders my father. After hearing this, Snape instantly regained his composure, frowned, and suspected that he had just heard it wrong. He turned his head and scanned the hall, and finally his eyes fell on Malfoy. Seeing Snape's venomous eyes falling on him, Malfoy shuddered and stood up from his chair in a stressful manner. Professor Snape, Professor McGonagall did say that, and cancelled your previous decision to deduct points from the 4 colleges. She just left the hall and seemed to be going to find Professor Dumbledore. Malfoy couldn't be arrogant in front of Snape. Snape's face changed immediately after hearing this. Deduct points? Dismissal? He just met Professor McGonagall. If there was something wrong, could they still talk calmly? Snape suddenly turned his head to look at Harry, and seeing Harry's unconvinced look, he sneered. It seems that I was indeed wrong, Mr. Potter. Harry was obviously stunned when he heard this, and then an unbelievable look appeared. He didn't hear it wrong, Snape actually admitted that he was wrong. However, before he could be happy for long, he heard Snape's next sentence. You are as useless as your father. You can't even tell that the professor is pretending. After saying this, Snape no longer paid attention to Harry, turned around and hurriedly left the hall. His hand had already touched the wizard robe and pulled out the wand. Although so many students did not recognize that the previous professor was actually a fake, Harry took all the responsibility. Looking at Snape's leaving figure, Harry opened his mouth and said in disbelief, No way. Is the original Snape a fake? Or is the Professor McGonagall just now, good thing, a fake? If Professor McGonagall is a fake. Harry suddenly felt a little cold, looking at Ron and Hermione next to him. They were looking at him. In addition to the same disbelief, there seemed to be a trace of sympathy. Hope, the instigator, took advantage of the fact that no one in the dormitory ran directly to the Magic City and quickly swallowed the 200 kilograms of mutton in the villa. Unfortunately, the mutton in the capital city is estimated to be available tomorrow. He was not in a hurry to go back. Anyway, he had finished his homework today, so he ran to the villa in the capital city, turned on the lights outside, and went directly into the swimming pool to swim. After swimming to his heart's content, he returned to Hogwarts and appeared directly in a cubicle in the bathroom, pushed the door and walked back to the dormitory. As soon as he entered the door, he found that Hermione was also there, and Harry looked extremely depressed for some reason. What happened? Hope asked in surprise when he saw this scene. Then, after Ron's narration, Hope knew what happened during his absence. He couldn't help but look at Harry, with admiration and a trace of guilt in his eyes. It's really hard to complain, Hope sighed in his heart. He didn't expect Harry to be so brave, although it might be because of his little misleading, but this courage is really admirable. No wonder he is the protagonist. Maybe Professor McGonagall is real. Hope couldn't help but comfort Harry. No, Professor McGonagall came just now, Harry said with a frustrated face. The truth of the matter has been determined. Not only was Snape fake, but the subsequent forms were also fake. Hope shook his head helplessly. There was nothing he could do. Who do you think the imposter is? What is his purpose in pretending to be two professors? Hermione asked thoughtfully. She had been thinking about how that person pretended to be two professors. At least no one noticed anything unusual, which showed that the imposter's level was very strong, but Hermione was thinking about what kind of magic could achieve this level. Transfiguration? Hermione was the first to rule out this option. It's not that transfiguration can't be done, but most teachers can't do it. Chapter 54, New Characteristics of Fire Dragon. Transfiguration generally refers to the transformation of other objects or even life, and rarely the transformation of oneself. This is a very dangerous behavior. If you are not careful, you can easily fix yourself into a strange appearance. Even Professor McGonagall, who is proficient in transfiguration, has said that she can only slightly transform the appearance of her face, and the change will not be much. This is enough to show that transfiguration can change the appearance, but it is too difficult for even Professor McGonagall to do it. But it does not mean that no one can do it. Hermione knows a wizard who can do it. That is Merlin. Well, it is said that Merlin can use transfiguration to change his body appearance at will, which is enough to show that the upper limit of transfiguration is actually not low. In addition to transfiguration, Hermione does not know what other magic can do this. Polyjuice Potion. A voice suddenly sounded, breaking the silence. Dumbledore looked at Snape and nodded slightly. He also thought of this possibility. Someone took Polyjuice Potion in Hogwarts and ran to the Great Hall to make a scene, but they couldn't figure out why. Is it for that thing? Snape frowned, as if he had thought of something, and couldn't help but speak. Thinking of this, Snape's face changed, and he walked directly to the principal's office. Dumbledore looked at his figure, and there was a trace of fluorescence in his eyes under his reading glasses, but he didn't say anything to stop him. Just watched Snape leave. Is it possible that the senior students were just naughty and made the Polyjuice Potion specifically for a prank? Professor McGonagall on the side couldn't help but put forward her own opinion. She naturally knew what Dumbledore was hiding in Hogwarts, but this matter seemed to be a prank against them. It's a bold guess, Minerva. It's not impossible. 360 Gryffindor students have been a bit of a headache recently. I've found some students trying to get in outside my office with the password, aiming for the Gryffindor sword in the Sorting Hat. Dumbledore couldn't help but rub his brows. Since the Gryffindor in the Sorting Hat came out, there have always been Gryffindor students who want to sneak into the headmaster's office to prove that they are real Gryffindors. Of course, there has been no successful example so far. It's my problem, Albus. McGonagall said apologetically. After all, she is the head of Gryffindor. No, Minerva, I don't mean to blame you. This is a Gryffindor child. If I knew this news when I went to school, I think I would be more active than anyone else. Dumbledore couldn't help but smile, as if he was thinking of his school days. If we don't find that person, should we let the students gather in the hall for a night to ensure safety? Professor McGonagall asked again. Dumbledore thought about it and shook his head slowly, but the current situation has not reached that level yet. In addition to the students' pranks, it is also possible that foreign wizards have sneaked in, but just from the current situation that the other party has actively exposed, it can be dealt with for the time being. Not yet, I will arrange Snape to patrol tonight. Dumbledore said. Okay, then I'll go and see if I can find any traces. McGonagall nodded and followed Dumbledore's advice. Hope didn't know what the professors were thinking, but he could probably guess something. Professors may be tormented more, but Snape is most likely to be tormented, although Snape is young and a close confidant of Dumbledore. He will not feel guilty about tormenting Snape, but will sleep more peacefully. Of course, he also has to consider the reactions of other people in the school. Mainly Professor Quirrell and Voldemort, who possesses Quirrell. I wonder if it will stimulate them to take action against the Philosopher's Stone in advance. Should he also take the time to get the Philosopher's Stone just in case? But thinking about it, with the means arranged by Dumbledore, Voldemort will probably suffer a big loss if he acts rashly. So there is nothing to worry about. Hope slept very peacefully that night. The next day came in a blink of an eye, and Hope started his daily study life again. Judging from the reactions of the professors in the auditorium in the morning, it seems that none of them were affected, except Snape. If you look closely, you can still see that his dark circles have become heavier. In addition, there is the only victim of this game, Harry Potter. Although it was the impostor's mischief that caused Harry to contradict the professor, Professor McGonagall discussed with Snape to cancel Harry's punishment. Snape did give McGonagall some face, but only a little. The 15 points that should have been deducted from Gryffindor were reduced to 5 points in the end, and the 1-month confinement was reduced to 1 week. Even so, this made Harry feel very bad. Hope was helpless and even started planning the next prank. His pranks were not really foolproof. Once they happened too many times, he would always be absent every time, and it would always attract attention. So if it could be solved at one time, it would be best to complete the task of fusing the boggart at one time. Moreover, he had already left a place for the scapegoat in his heart. Last night, his progress points suddenly increased by more than 500. He felt that his self-transformation was much smoother and more perfect than before. From the appearance alone, it was difficult for ordinary people to directly expose him. After dinner, Hope still took advantage of the time to go to the toilet and phantom to Guangdu to continue eating mutton. Today, the mutton from Beijing has also arrived. Hope phantomed to the villa in Beijing and saw utensils all over the floor. It seems that there are too many, so there are iron basins, wooden basins, and even wooden barrels. But he didn't care about these and started eating directly. Under the effect of the flying spell and swallowing, 500 kilograms of mutton was completely decomposed, and a layer of powder was precipitated on the surface of his skin. At the same time, his progress in fusing the fire dragon finally exceeded 2,000. Hope's eyes widened slightly, looking at the system. As the progress exceeded 2,000, another feature was extracted from the fire dragon, but why does this feature feel a little strange? All over the body, each part of the body has a specific magical effect. Hope couldn't help but blink. Does that mean he is now like the fire dragon, with treasures all over his body? He knows that most of the things on the fire dragon have powerful magical effects and can be used to make many things. So he is the same now. The organs on his body are more valuable? If they are combined, they will be worthless? Even if they are valuable, he can't take out his organs and sell them, right? Hope was a little speechless, feeling that this characteristic was a bit useless. Song made him a walking treasure house. Of course, it's not useless. For example, his hair and nails can be cut and grown. If according to the characteristic of being full of treasures, these hair and nails should also be treasures. From time to time, you can also draw blood, but I don't know if his blood has the same effect as the fire dragon's blood. Suddenly Hope was stunned and woke up. No. This characteristic is not so useless. If he is just full of treasures, then he is at most as valuable as a fire dragon, but his characteristics can be up to 10,000 times. Doesn't this mean that the effect can be achieved is also 10,000 times stronger than the precious materials of the fire dragon? Thinking of this, Hope couldn't help but take a breath. Under the 10,000 times characteristic, how can this be called full of treasures? It should be called a mountain of gold. But now he has not completely merged with the fire dragon, nor has he reached the 10,000 times characteristic, so there is no rush for the time being. Hope's mood suddenly improved. He changed into a swimsuit, jumped out with a few steps, and fell into the swimming pool. While swimming happily, he was thinking. Maybe he can try to learn potion science later. After all, most of the materials of the fire dragon are used to make potions. But when he thought about who the professor of potion science was, Hope's idea was directly gone. Although he himself did not like studying, especially the potion course was rather boring, he could easily blame Snape for his poor performance in potion, and I think other people would think so too. But thinking about it, he actually did not need to study the uses of the materials on him, and let professionals do professional things directly. Hope suddenly thought of the By family's shop. Didn't they like to collect magic materials? I wonder if they are good at studying these things. Of course, there is a problem. Even if others have studied it, they may not tell him. But as long as others need the materials in his hands, he can still do whatever he wants. Hope suddenly had an idea and planned to take time to visit the ruins of the old capital tomorrow. No. Maybe it would be better to find his dear nephew first. Hope floated on the water, kicking his feet slightly on the water, splashing water, staring at the night sky. Of course, he could not expect to see many stars in the capital of this era. He should be satisfied with the moon. When he got up the next morning, Hope left before the others, actually directly operating to the capital. This time he learned his lesson and transformed into a young boy, wearing a gray gown. Through the slits on both sides of the gown, you can see the fans hanging inside. It was almost afternoon here. Hope located Huobufan's position through the treasure perception and walked directly in the United College. Last time, Huobufan said that there were many students in the United College, and the number of professors was not as frugal as Hogwarts, so the probability of being recognized in the college was very low. However, these college students all had a jade card to identify their identities, but generally they would not check your jade card at will. Hope walked openly in the United College, admiring the beautiful scenery nearby, and strolled towards Huobufan. Under his perception, he could see Huobufan moving quickly in the air, probably flying on a sword. It was just that he was not flying straight, but left and right, which reminded Hope of what Huobufan said last time, that there would be some sword-flying competitions in the college. Could it be that? Thank you for the monthly ticket of the Big Brother Chuanxi. Chapter 55 Anger. It didn't take long for Hope to reach where Huobufan was, but he found that there were many people gathered here. There were at least hundreds of people, scattered around, with their eyes focused on a hollow stone tower. And Huobufan was in this stone tower at the moment. This is called a stone tower, but it is not actually a tower, but a multi-layer circular passage made of stones. Entering from the entrance below, you will enter a slightly narrow passage. There are some huge stones blocking the road in front, left, right, and up and down, constantly cutting a passage. Sometimes you can only drill through the very narrow passage on the right, and sometimes you can only turn from the bottom. This is still a relatively simple part. Hope even saw some more peculiar passages, and he could only lie down to pass through. This passage keeps winding forward, like a spiral, overlapping to form a stone tower that can be seen from the outside. At the top of the stone tower, there is a bronze ancient bell hanging at the end of the passage. Hope had a strong interest in his eyes, watching Huobufan flying through the stone tower at a very fast speed. If he made a mistake, he would hit the boulder on the road. With the speed of his flying sword, he might have a broken head. Woo! But Huobufan obviously did not make any mistakes. Some of his seemingly thrilling operations even attracted the shouts of the surrounding girls, and of course there was no shortage of shouts from the boys. Finally, Huobufan rushed out of the passage and passed by the ancient bell, which rang spontaneously, making a deep sound. Hope looked at the stone tower. There was no one else in the stone tower. This game seemed to be a single-player game, and there was no other competition. Huobufan flew down from the sky with a proud face, flying the peachwood sword, welcoming the cheers and applause of others. Some bold girls even went up to hug Huobufan, which refreshed Hope's three views, which seemed to be more open than the West. But in a blink of an eye, he thought that his hometown regarded the reproduction of blood as the most important thing, and this matter did not change with the changes in the Muggle world. Compared with the West, this is undoubtedly a crucial tradition. And this place is obviously not a place for Huobufan alone. Soon, someone else flew in with a sword and shuttled freely inside. But it was not as smooth as Huobufan. Occasionally, he would slow down and pass smoothly. Suddenly, he could not slow down enough and hit the boulder directly. He saw the whole person falling directly into the boulder, and the boulder was knocked into a pit. However, no one was surprised by such a thing. The next moment, Hope saw the man crawling out of the boulder. It seemed that there was no injury on his body. The boulder was quickly repaired to its original state and continued to shuttle with a sword. Hope could not help but nod his head. It seemed that safety was still guaranteed. Sometimes he would cheer for others' wonderful operations, and sometimes he would boo because others slowed down to pass smoothly. After a while, Hope came back to his senses and felt a little unsatisfied. If he didn't have something to do, he should be able to watch here all day. Of course, if there was no one around, he would still be happy to go in and play. Naturally, he was not afraid of exposing his identity, but worried about embarrassment. He turned to look at Huobufan and found that Huobufan was sitting in a place to rest. Some wizards of the same age gathered around him, both men and women. From Huobufan's position, he seemed to be the leader of this group. But considering Huobufan's identity, this was not surprising. Hope walked over there immediately. Before he got close, someone in the group saw him and looked at him coldly. His eyes were fixed on him. His attitude was very obvious. Seeing this, the others smiled and said nothing, and continued to look at the stone tower bed. Huobufan, who was in the center, never paid attention to this side from beginning to end. Hope was a little surprised. The atmosphere here was very different from Hogwarts. But if Malfoy was given a chance, he would be more arrogant than Huobufan. This is not a place you should be near, get out. Seeing Hope still coming towards this side, the man's face darkened, and he shouted coldly, his nostrils raised high, like the doorman in the Prime Minister's mansion. Even if he passed by Zhou Su, he would feel dizzy. Hope stopped immediately and just looked at the man, his eyes narrowed slightly. Sure enough, he was not wrong about Huobufan before. At first glance, he really looked exactly like Malfoy. It seems that Dean by Ding has done too little. Maybe they should really be glad that he didn't study here, otherwise Hope felt that he couldn't bear to do nothing. Just like now, the next moment, the boy who looked at Hope coldly changed his face suddenly, the ground under his feet suddenly became empty, and the whole person fell down, and the mud on all sides buried him like a tide. Unlike Huobufan before, this time Hope didn't even leave his head, and the whole person was buried alive. This sudden change startled the small group, especially Huobufan. Looking at this familiar scene, his face suddenly changed, remembering 10 unforgettable memories. Ah! Some people screamed, and some people took out their wands in a panic to save people, which immediately attracted the attention of people near the stone tower, but they were a little confused. When they looked over, the man had been completely buried alive, so they naturally didn't know what happened. They only saw a group of people doing something in a panic. None of these people suspected Hope. After all, in their opinion, Hope did nothing, not even taking out his wand. Huobufan, who had experienced the same scene, was searching for Hope's figure around at this moment, but Hope's figure this time was completely different from the last time, so he naturally didn't find it. In the end, his eyes could only fall on Hope, who was closest to them. Hope looked at the group of wizards quietly. It must be said that they still had some skills. They cast a spell together to directly split the ground. However, one of them was obviously not very skilled and actually used an attack spell, which directly blew a big hole in the ground. However, this opened up the situation and let the man's head appear on the ground, but blood had already appeared on his face. Hope just wanted to teach him a lesson and didn't really want to kill him, otherwise he could have relied on the digging and stone digging properties to directly pour soil into his nostrils, and then it would be useless even if he dug it out. The boy was dug out and coughed violently, breathing hard, tears rolling down his face was very pale, and he was extremely frightened. Obviously, he had never had such an experience in his life. Who did it? Stand up. Seeing that the people were rescued, one of the boys shouted loudly to the surroundings with an angry face, and his eyes swept through the wizards one by one, trying to find out who was secretly doing it, but completely ignored Hope, who was closest to them. There was no way, because they were too close. Every move could be seen by Kong and they got their ultimate gold water level. However, no one else stood up except Hope. These people could only take that person away quickly. It seemed that they should go to the school hospital in the United College. Maybe it was called a medical clinic. Huobufan was the only one left in the place. Hope continued to approach. Huobufan stared at him closely, and it seemed that he had doubts. I thought that what you inherited was only the foundation, strength and privileges, but I didn't expect that you were arrogant. Without the obstruction of others, Hope sat beside Huobufan, looking at the stone tower and said casually. Huobufan's pupils shrank slightly, and he didn't speak. He continued to stare at Hope. He was probably sure in his heart that this person who looked younger than him was his uncle. Who is he to you? How can he be more arrogant than you? Could he be your eldest brother? Hope said with a hint of sarcasm. People from the Huo family's collateral line can be regarded as distant relatives. Huobufan sighed, and from the tone of his voice, he probably knew that this person was his uncle. Oh. So it's reasonable for me, an elder, to educate him? Hope smiled softly, seeming a little surprised. If you say so, then so. Actually, he's not a bad person by nature. Huobufan explained hesitantly. Really? Maybe he's too bad to know it. Hope shrugged and said indifferently. To be honest, he was really angry for a moment just now. It wasn't the anger of being despised and blocked, but seeing something that should be buried in the past, and feeling it personally, he felt a sense of nobility and generals, which was a wonderful experience. On the contrary, he didn't feel these things in Hogwarts. The bigger reason was that even those self-righteous pure-blood families didn't actually have this quality, or their foundation was not qualified to produce this quality. Maybe Malfoy's father Lucius could be, but he had never seen it, and the little brats in school could not show such temperament. But here, just now, he clearly felt it, so he instinctively had a stress reaction. I have a drop of blood here, and I want to find someone to study its efficacy. Who among the 5 major families is good at this? Hope took out a glass bottle from his purse, which contained a drop of blood. This glass bottle was found in the villa and seemed to be a gift left by the previous owner of the villa. You family, most of the magic potions in the magic world are produced by their family. Huobufan said without hesitation. Do you know anyone? Please help pass the thing over. This thing is very valuable, definitely 1,000 times more valuable than the blood of the fire dragon. Hope said casually. The value of this thing is right here. He doesn't believe they won't be tempted. If they can't trust other people, can they trust the system? If they say it's full of treasures, then it must be a treasure. I know him. Our 5 major families have friendships on weekdays. Huobufan took the glass directly, and it seemed that he agreed. Hope nodded, said nothing, and just watched the figure passing through the stone tower. After a while, he stood up and was about to leave. He had stayed here long enough. Let's just disperse this set of things. It's harmless for other people if I can't see them, but you are my nephew, and I see you the most. I'm afraid that one day I won't be able to resist and do something to you. Before leaving, Hope said something earnestly with a sigh on his face. Then he walked away from this area and waited until there was no one around before he directly used apparition to return to Hogwarts. Huobufan held the glass in his hand and looked at Hope's back as he left. There was an indescribable emotion in his heart. Why should he listen to him? An uncle who was expelled from the school, who was younger than him, might be. I even wet the bed at night. But it was this person who left an indelible impression in his heart. This ability to do whatever he wanted, to easily bury people alive, and the ability to apparate freely and easily break through the anti-apparition magic of the academy, all made that person very mysterious and unfathomable. Please give me flowers. He asked the professor if the apparition in other places was different from theirs, so they could break through the anti-apparition magic of the academy, and naturally got a negative answer. Although the West and the East are different, but in fact, many things are connected. Some are transmitted from this side, and some are transmitted from that side, and they influence each other. He returned to Hogwarts and continued to attend classes. This incident was just an episode for him. Well, it still had a great impact on him, and he kept it in mind. In the following days, Hope was much more honest and went to get out of class normally. Of course, most of the time, a poor student is still a poor student. Unless there is a plug-in, it is difficult to change. He no longer used self-transformation pranks. The previous events seemed to have completely passed. The only one who would always think about it was Harry. After all, the week of detention was a torture for him, or it was Snape's torture. After school, he had to help him deal with the troublesome magic materials, and he had to endure his weird temper. God knows how he spent that week. But Harry did not gain nothing. One day during the week of detention, Harry quietly told them a shocking secret. I saw Snape treating his wound. He was injured, and I heard him talking about the three-headed dog we met in the corridor on the 4th floor. I guess he must want to steal the things guarded inside. Maybe the round pretender is related to him. He asked someone to impersonate him, so he had time to steal things. But the thunder pretender messed everything up for some reason. Harry's wonderful reasoning made even Hope dumbfounded. At first glance, it made sense, but he couldn't listen carefully. But it also proved one thing. Once the door of suspicion is opened, it cannot be closed. They are looking for evidence to match Snape. Hope did not choose to correct them. After all, he could not produce conclusive evidence to dispel their suspicion, so he did not care about it. October came in a blink of an eye. These days, Zhai Qian honestly completed the exclusive task of fusing the fire dragon. Finally, a few days after entering October, the fire dragon was completely fused. From then on, he no longer had to eat goat meat. He also stopped purchasing from the Magic City and the capital. Not only that, when the fire dragon was completely fused, he extracted another feature from the fire dragon. Dragon-breathing flame, flames can be sprayed through the mouth and nose. Since then, the three characteristics that Hope extracted from the fire dragon, tough skin, full of treasures and dragon breath leaf flame, have reached 10,000 times the characteristics. Hope secretly tried the dragon breath flame, and deliberately controlled it to spray out a wisp of flame. The high temperature almost ignited the air, which scared Hope. Some doubts whether he would be vaporized directly if he was not properly controlled. Fortunately, after a little careful attempt, he was able to completely control the power of the flame, so that it was not so terrifying. Under normal circumstances, Hope would not directly show its 10,000 times power, which would easily cause trouble, but just use it as an ordinary characteristic. As for tough skin, that is what Hope really cares about. In order to verify the power of tough skin, he used himself as an experimental material. He unboxed the gun he had dug out from the underground of the Magic City, loaded it with bullets, and fired a shot at his palm. Even though he was extremely confident that he could definitely withstand this bullet, after all, it was a characteristic extracted from the fire dragon, and it was a 10,000 times characteristic. If he couldn't even defend against a mere bullet, he felt that he could pull the system and jump off the building. But when he actually fired the gun, he was still a little nervous. After all, it was a gun. The result was actually predetermined. After the gun went off, there was not even a mark on his hand, which was enough to prove how strong the tough skin was. The upper limit was unknown, but the lower limit must be very high. Moreover, tough skin can not only withstand physical attacks, but also magical attacks. He was confident that he could withstand most spells, but he was not sure about some more special magics, and he would not try to see if he could really withstand it. For example, the Unforgivable Curse, the Imperious Curse, the Cruciatus Curse and the Killing Curse. In his understanding, there are souls in this world, and these three evil curses seem to target the soul, unlike ordinary spells. For example, the Killing Curse will not leave any wounds after casting, but the person is gone, which is enough to prove that this spell is not aimed at the flesh. And the four words, tough skin, made Hope doubt whether it can withstand soul magic attacks. All this is unknown, it may be able to withstand, or it may not be able to withstand, but no matter what, Hope will not take his life to try. However, even if it can block most of the spells, it is enough for the current coverage. As long as he does not encounter wizards who eat the Unforgivable Curse as a meal, he will be invincible. After Hope merges with the fire dragon, he plans to completely merge the boggart. Before that, he had been waiting for the tough skin to reach the 10,000 times characteristic soil. Chapter 56, Sword Fighting. In case he makes a mistake and is arrested by Dumbledore himself, that would be a big deal. Except for Quirrell, no one else in the school would use the unforgivable curse, so as long as he doesn't run into Quirrell, he would be safe. Have you heard that someone saw that big spider in the basement again recently? At lunchtime, Ron followed them to talk about the gossip he had heard. I heard from Hagrid that the big spider is a dangerous magical animal called an acromantula. Do you think Snape put it in to divert the professor's attention? Harry guessed immediately after hearing it. Hope couldn't help but roll his eyes slightly, feeling that Harry's recent Snape suspicion syndrome has become more serious. This acromantula was naturally disguised by him, just to lure the tiger away from the mountain, so that Snape would not be too idle recently and always come to the auditorium on time for dinner, and he would not find a chance to play a prank. Friday came again in a blink of an eye, and Harry and the others walked out of the classroom with tired faces and walked towards the auditorium. There were 2 full potion classes in the morning. Snape, who had not found the acromantula recently and had been working overtime, became more and more gloomy, and almost released all his passion on Harry. And those who were close to Harry were inevitably affected. Anyway, after this class, Hope still felt Snape's voice lingering in his ears. I'm going to ask Hagrid about the acromantula this afternoon. Hope, do you want to go with me? After dinner, Harry and the other 2 invited Hope. But Hope directly refused. He might as well go swimming with this time, and he has recently become fascinated with flying swords. Okay. Harry had no choice but to see that Hope was not interested in catching Snape's conspiracy, so he could only go with Ron and Hermione. When Hope apparat to the United College, it was completely dark. But the Flying Sword Stone Tower was unusually lively, because it was Friday night, and it was a holiday like Hope. Compared with usual times, 410 was more lively at this time. As soon as I arrived, I heard that there was a game tonight, and the venue was directly reserved by the 5 major families, but there was no restriction on others to watch. Everyone was naturally happy to see the dog-eat-dog behavior of the 5 major families, and the stone tower was surrounded early. Some people couldn't get a seat, so they could only watch from the air with peachwood swords. And around the stone tower, there were some searchlights, which seemed to have been transformed by magic, making the venue very bright, and expelling all the darkness inside and outside. Hope was wearing a grey long gown and sitting diagonally on the peachwood sword, half of his buttocks were against the wooden sword, and his right foot was raised and stepped on the wooden handle, looking up like other people. In the center of the stone tower, other people were prohibited from entering. There were several chairs in each of the 5 directions, where the leaders of the 5 major families in the academy sat, usually people from the main lineage. He saw Hua Buffon among them, but although he was also sitting on a large sofa, he seemed to be squeezed to the edge, and a man who looked older was sitting among the group of Hua's children. Of course, Hope was not interested in the affairs of these wealthy families. He looked at the stone tower. The stone tower tonight was a little different. There was an extra square stone pillar inside the stone tower. There were holes on the pillar. Although it was a stone pillar, it actually looked more like a pile of square stones. I heard from the people next to me that this stone pillar was actually a magic arrow tower. It would sense people and then shoot stone arrows. If you don't dodge in time, you may be knocked out of the stone tower, directly eliminated. Hope's eyes flashed with excitement. This way of playing is more exciting. Sure enough, these wealthy families are best at this kind of play. The game started soon. Hope watched with great interest and cheered loudly like everyone else. It was just that at the beginning of the game, the stone tower suddenly shook and scattered a large amount of dust, but others were not surprised at all, as if they were accustomed to such things. As the stone tower shook like this, the space seemed to change a lot. Hope suddenly realized that this was actually changing the map. Not only that, Hope saw another interesting scene. This was not a one-on-one competition, but a 2-person competition. It was just that one person entered from the lower entrance and the other entered from the upper exit. This meant that unless the 2 were eliminated in advance, they would definitely meet, and such a meeting did not prohibit attacking. In other words, this was not just a competition of speed. If you couldn't outrun the other party, you could also compete in magic in the middle and solve the other party in advance. Just listening to the rules, he was a little excited. No wonder so many people gathered here. He felt a little itchy in his heart, and he wanted to go up and play. Soon, 2 people came out of the 5 big families, one up and one down. At the moment when the ancient bell rang, the 2 people suddenly rushed into the passage with swords. When it comes to the face of the big families, those who can be sent out are all strong and very fast. And the magic arrow tower was also rotating the stone pillar at this moment. It was indeed made of blocks. The dense holes were facing the front of the figure, and stone arrows were shot out quickly. The students inside had to pass quickly and dodge the stone arrows from time to time. The 2 people above and below both narrowly avoided the arrows, and their speeds were similar. They soon met in the passage in the middle of the stone tower. Both of them tacitly grasped the fans at their waists in advance. When they met, one of them read out the spell loudly, but the other did not cast the spell immediately, and instead quickly dodged the spell shot by the other party in this narrow passage. The moment he dodged, he also cast a spell to fight back. Flying sand and running stones. The blue flames shot out from the top of the fan and hit the student who had no time to dodge. The next moment, the student was directly knocked out, and blood could even be seen spilling in the air. His figure flew into the stone tower, but was hit by the stone arrows that shot in, and was bounced back again, hitting the wall and falling downwards. Hope was a little surprised. He didn't expect it to be so big. This spell could be used directly in a duel, but seeing the reactions of the people around him, they didn't seem to care. Yuanshir cheered for this wonderful duel. The man who fell directly to the ground, but he didn't fall to pieces. Instead, he sank into the ground. The ground was like a wall, and was enchanted. But even so, the spell just now was not fake. The person who won the duel continued to fly forward with a sword, but Hope found that the speed of the stone tower spraying stone arrows seemed to be getting faster and faster. The man dodged with great difficulty, but was hit by a stone arrow in the process of a reckless advance. He flew out of the hollow wall from the passage and fell to the ground. Neither of them finished the game, which means it was a draw. And the stone arrow didn't have much attack power, but it would generate a soft and huge force at the moment of hitting the target, which could both bounce people away and not hurt students. As the game ended, the ancient bell rang, and then someone ran into the stone tower and carried the person inside out. It can be seen that the person who was hit by the spell was covered in blood and seemed to have suffered a lot of injuries. The game continued quickly, and Hope found that the difficulty of this game was indeed very high. The duel in the middle was not the focus, but as it got closer to the finish line, the stone arrows shot from the stone tower were not only faster, but also more in number. If you want to win the game, you can't stop to avoid the stone arrows, but you have to keep accelerating. Otherwise, once you stop, you will be focused on the starting acceleration of flying the sword again can't avoid the speed of the stone arrows. After several groups, no one won. Hope saw that the disciple of the Hua family who was buried alive by him before also went on the field, but the result was very bad. He lost the duel in the middle and was carried to the school hospital by Hua Bufan's other 2 brothers. Hope's eyes flickered slightly when he saw this. He felt excited just by watching. It would be more exciting to play in person. He was not a novice. He would come here to play after dinner at Hogwarts these days. It was already early in the morning. The whole stone tower was empty, which made him have a lot of fun. Although there was no light source at night to avoid attracting the security guards of the academy, his ability to dig soil and stones gave him a natural sense of stone. Even without lights, he could sense all the structures of the stone tower and walk through it with his eyes closed. He glanced at the direction where Hua Bufan's 2 younger brothers left, and then controlled the peachwood sword to fall downwards. When he appeared again, he had transformed into one of Hua Bufan's younger brothers. He squeezed through the crowd outside and successfully entered the inner circle. He came to Hua Bufan's side. Hua Bufan just glanced at him and didn't find anything unusual. He continued to look at the stone tower. Humph, they are all trash. The man sitting next to Hua Bufan saw his younger brother falling from the stone tower, snorted coldly, and cursed unhappily. Hope heard Hua Bufan's address and probably knew that this was Hua Bufan's 3rd brother. 5th brother, why don't you fight in person in this battle? I heard that even the eldest brother praised your sword-riding skills and said that you have inherited your father's true teachings. Now whether you can save the face of my Hua family and stand out in the Wutai family depends on you." The man turned to look at Hua Bufan, changed his previous appearance, and said with a smile. It seemed to be a proposal, but in fact he could not refuse it at all. "Okay, third brother." Hua Bufan agreed expressionlessly. Hope looked at the stone tower, blinked his eyes, and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The internal struggle of this wealthy family seemed to be more fierce. This was clearly to embarrass him. He just looked around, at least no one from the main lineage came on the field in person. It would be good if they won, but it would be embarrassing if they lost. But when he thought about it, these people were just half-brothers, so it was normal that their relationship was not very good. Soon it was Hua Bufan's turn to go on the field. He stood up and attracted everyone's attention at once. No one expected Hua Bufan to go on the field in person. He stepped on the peachwood sword, jumped up, and slowly floated towards the entrance. It seemed that because of Hua Bufan's appearance, the other person who was originally going to go on the field was directly replaced by another person. Before going on the field, he was even instructed by a main lineage, as if he was told something. When he went on the field, it could be seen that the man stared at Hua Bufan with malicious eyes. Hope shook his head slightly. It seems that the rich family is really surrounded by enemies. It is more comfortable to stay in Hogwarts. Feeling a little tired of standing, Hope lifted his buttocks and sat on the armrest of Hua Bufan's sofa, which immediately attracted the attention of Hua Bufan's third brother. He frowned and seemed to want to say something, but Hope looked at him and smiled widely. The man snorted coldly, but did not speak in the end and continued to look at the stone tower. The game started soon. Hua Bufan was really good at it. He was very fast and could do it easily. However, the other person was also not slow. Compared with the previous person, the strength of these two people was in the forefront. But Hope could see that Hua Bufan's speed was still slightly lower than the other person, and this was very critical. With the speed of the two people, they must meet in the middle of the stone tower, but the faster the speed, the earlier they would enter the area that was obviously different from other sections. That area was longer than the previous section, and it seemed to be specially used for duels. Entering this area early is more advantageous for the duel. Of course, one party can deliberately slow down and wait for the rabbit in the advantageous channel, but this is a bit of cheating, which can be said to be harmful to others and not beneficial to oneself, because the longer it takes to pass the entire channel, the stronger the magic arrow tower will be. So far, even if the speed reaches the extreme and every second counts, it will be defeated in the last section, let alone this kind of waiting. In this occasion, although this kind of cheating behavior can bring some advantages to the party, there are so many spectators outside, and it will undoubtedly receive a boo, which will lose the face of the family. However, at this time, something unexpected happened. Hua Bufan's opponent actually stopped on his own initiative, hid behind a stone pillar to avoid the stone arrows shot from the arrow tower, and held the wooden fan at his waist. Huh! The spectators outside saw this scene and screamed. Even if the main lineage looked outside with cold eyes, they still couldn't stop the boos from others. Hope narrowed his eyes slightly. If Hua Bufan stopped, he would basically not be able to get out of the passage. But if he forced his way in, he would probably suffer a loss, and it would be even more embarrassing to lose in the duel. When he was about to get close, Hua Bufan had already grasped the fan, and his speed did not slow down at all, as if he really wanted to force his way in. When he broke into the passage where his opponent was, a spell had been prepared and attacked him. Everyone held their breath and watched this scene, but something unexpected happened. The spell that was about to hit Hua Bufan was suddenly bounced back, and a glowing invisible wall could be seen in front of Hua Bufan. The spell bounced back and hit the man, knocking him out directly, and flew heavily out of the stone tower. Woo! Everyone had to exclaim when they saw this, even Hope. At some point, Hua Bufan actually put an armor spell on himself. Because of this armor spell, he didn't even stop, nor did he shoot a spell, and rushed forward with death in mind. No one expected that this fourth-year wizard mastered such an advanced spell as the armor spell. Humph! Hope heard a cold snort from the side, obviously very dissatisfied with this situation. But even so, he was still hit by a stone arrow in the last section of the journey, but he was also the person closest to the exit so far in the competition. Although he failed, he still received cheers and applause from many people. In contrast, the faces of the families of Hua Bufan's opponents turned black at this moment. This wave was undoubtedly a blood loss. I thought that even if I lost face, it would be a gain if Hua Bufan was embarrassed and injured. Who would have thought that he would lose face and achieve such a result? How could I be happy? 4.6 Hua Bufan came back here with a smile on his face. He was slightly stunned when he saw Hope sitting on the side of the sofa, but he didn't say anything. With the end of this game, the next game will come. They don't have a fixed order and opponents. It depends on who wants to go up, especially the two parties with conflicts. If one side sends people, the other side will mostly send people. I'll try. Hope volunteered. He couldn't wait and wanted to try if he could run down. Hua Bufan looked at Hope, who was dressed as his younger brother, with a little surprise. He remembered that the other party was not good at this kind of sports, but he didn't stop him and said casually, "Okay." Hope then walked out with an expectant look on his face, took out a small sword from his long gown, threw it casually, and the peachwood sword suddenly became larger and floated on the ground. He jumped lightly and landed steadily on the peachwood sword. Although no one applauded, he felt very handsome. "Humph, you really spend a lot of money on your little brother." The third brother frowned and said in a sarcastic tone. "You know, ordinary peachwood swords are not cheap for ordinary families, which is equivalent to a car for ordinary people. And Hope's peachwood sword with shrinking spell is made of superior materials, which is much faster than ordinary peachwood swords, which is equivalent to a luxury car. As a wealthy family, they are indeed rich, but they are just students at present, and they can't have much money. In the eyes of others, this is already too much money to spend, and they actually bought a luxury car for their younger brother. If you tell others about it, people will laugh to death." Hua Bufan's face also changed slightly. Where did his younger brother get the money to buy a luxury version of peachwood sword? Even if he bought it for his uncle before, he was reluctant to spend it, and it almost took half of his pocket money. As Hope walked out, the clan saw this and thought that Hope was Hua Bufan's confidant. Naturally, they would not miss this opportunity for revenge and sent 10 people out. Chapter 57 The First Game in Life. Be careful. Hua Bufan saw which family sent the person, his face changed slightly, and he couldn't help but shout softly, "The person is not friendly." Hope was calm, and he exerted a little force on his back foot. The front end of the peachwood sword suddenly rose up, and the next moment he flew out suddenly. On the way, the sword hit high again. The whole person was almost parallel to the ground, but he didn't fall off the sword, like a magnet absorbed on the peachwood sword. Soaring into the sky, he came to the entrance above the stone tower, and the ancient bell was hanging beside him. Looking at the passage in front, Hope couldn't help but feel a little excited. This was his first time to officially participate in such a competition. The feeling was completely different from the previous late-night secret practice. He felt a burst of air in his chest. His eyes flickered slightly, and as the ancient bell rang, Hope's figure instantly rushed out and flew down the passage with his sword. Left and right, his speed was no slower than those senior students who had practiced for many years. His speed was even faster than Hua Bufan. Everyone's starting line is the same, because this map is randomly generated. If ordinary people want to rush through quickly, the first requirement is sharp eyes. They need to judge where the next passage is at the moment they just passed the previous checkpoint and are about to enter the next checkpoint. Once they look slowly, their speed will naturally drop. The second requirement is the body's reaction ability. Passing these obstacles is not just about good eyesight, because some checkpoints require sideways passage, some checkpoints require squatting passage, and there are even checkpoints that require lying down. Even if the eyesight is sufficient, failure to react quickly will cause the speed to slow down, or even directly hit the wall. However, Hope's digging and stone digging characteristics can sense the entire stone tower and build a 3D model of the entire stone tower in his mind. He can know the passageway without eyes. When he passed the first checkpoint, he had already seen what the checkpoints behind were like. He didn't need to look at it at all. The familiarity with the passage was like an instinct engraved in his body, just like knowing the answer to the test paper in advance. The only thing that limited him was his body's reaction ability. But because he was familiar with the passageway, he could react in advance to pass the next one. That is, when others passed the passageway and observed the next one, he was already reacting and preparing to pass the next one. He had one less time to observe and react than others, so his speed was naturally faster than others. In just 5 or 6 seconds, the gap between him and his opponent was obvious. So fast. Hua Buffan's eyes widened slightly. How could he not know that his younger brother had such a trick? The audience was also watching this scene in shock. The figure seemed to be flying in the sky without any obstacles. The speed did not slow down at all. The stone arrows shot by the stone tower could only fall behind him, and he was even thrown away. If the passageway is divided into sections, when the opponent just passed the second section, Hope was already in the third section and sprinting towards the fourth section. Such an obvious gap made all the audience present stare at him, and they dared not even breathe. And the gap seems to be widening. Especially when Hope passed through the middle area of the passage, the level of the previous players was not much different. Even if they were a little different, they would mostly meet in this middle area and fight for a moment. But when Hope passed through the middle area, the opponent was still a clear gap away from entering this middle area. How could it be? The gap was reflected sharply at this moment. Even people who didn't know about this game could see how huge the gap was. Screams rang out, and the outside audience looked at them in disbelief. This speed is too fast. Many people opened their mouths and eyes wide, forgetting to close their mouths. At this moment, Hope's opponent was concentrating on riding his sword and galloping. He did not forget the task that the disciple of the main lineage had just given him. It was undoubtedly the same operation as before. Since he had been shameless once, it didn't matter if he did it again. He would stop in front of the middle area, ambush, seize the opportunity to attack first, and make sure to seriously injure the boy on the opposite side. Almost there. As long as he passed a few checkpoints, he could reach the checkpoint in the middle area. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly rushed out from the checkpoint in front, which scared him. Before he could react, there was only a fist in front of him that was rapidly enlarging. The next moment, the man's face was distorted by the fist, and even half of his face collapsed. The terrifying power exploded on his face, and the whole person flew backwards. This was just a moment. The audience outside didn't even see Hope raise his fist clearly, and saw another player flying in the opposite direction. And Hope didn't stop at all, and continued to rush down, like waving his hand to drive away flies on the road. At this time, no one had time to look at the other player who flew out. All eyes were firmly locked on Hope's figure. Because they found that the speed of the stone tower shooting stone arrows was obviously much faster than before, but Hope still threw them away. Could it be? All the audience held their breath at this time, without blinking, for fear of missing the next scene. When Hope's figure appeared outside the entrance of the stone tower, the ancient bell rang, and cheers exploded directly. Countless cheers rang out, rapping from all directions. It was a pure and enthusiastic sound. Even in the corner of the academy, you can hear the cheers here. Hope looked at the excited crowd waving and cheering at him again, and couldn't help but stretch out his hands and fly high to welcome his victory. He was also very excited, with a light in his eyes and a big smile on his lips. He felt that all the cells in his body were blooming at this moment. This feeling was too wonderful, making him a little dizzy. He flew around the stone tower in the air for a few circles and waved to the group of excited fans outside, and then flew away directly, leaving them with a proud and unforgettable figure. As Hope left, someone remembered the other contestant who had fallen. They carried him out, but found that he looked very miserable. Half of his face collapsed, his face was covered with blood, and he was in a coma, no better than those students who were hit by the attack spell. There was no way. Hope had thought about using magic to duel. These days he had mastered an attack magic that could turn everything into stone. But he couldn't cast spells silently and without a wand, which would cause a problem. The spell he recited was in a foreign language, which was a bit embarrassing. If people heard it, they would doubt his identity, so he could only use his fists. His sword speed plus the opponent's sword speed was like two speeding cars colliding with each other. It was this obstacle-filled passage that limited the speed of their peachwood swords. Otherwise, with the real speed of the peachwood swords, even wizards would be killed on the spot in a head-on collision. Of course, this is based on the fact that there is no corresponding protective magic on the peachwood sword, but in fact there is. In order to prevent the wizard who flies the sword too fast from hitting something and dying directly, there is still such protective magic on the peachwood sword, otherwise the student's current situation must be even worse. Although Hope hit him with his fist, the speed was no different from the other party hitting him with his face. It was also a collision, but Hope was fine. This is naturally attributed to his tough skin characteristics. That's why he dared to play like this. After playing for a while, Hope didn't stay here for long and went back to Hogwarts directly. It was still afternoon here. And Hope, who had nothing to do, naturally didn't go to study. He could only apparate again, chose a sunny island, and transformed into a Muggle tourist, basking in the sun on the beach, watching the unrestrained foreign beauties running around on the beach. The scene was very spectacular. He didn't return to Hogwarts until dinner time, walked out of the Gryffindor common room, and walked towards the auditorium on the first floor. Suddenly he stopped and looked around with a little doubt. Why did Hogwarts feel a little empty? Then he realized that it was not an illusion. There was really no student around, and he didn't even hear a trace of noise. It was Friday afternoon, and all the students were on vacation. Even at dinner time, it shouldn't be so quiet. Hope frowned. It was obvious that something was wrong, but he didn't know the reason. He could only go downstairs and go to the auditorium first to see if there was a celebration or something. However, when he went down to the second floor, he couldn't help but stop again. He saw a huge figure standing in the corridor a few meters away. This figure was almost as tall as Hagrid, and his body was equally huge. His skin was like a layer of grey hard skin, his arms were very long, he had two big sawls, thick joints, and a bald and pointed head. He was holding a huge wooden stick in his hand. Hope couldn't help but tilt his head slightly, and immediately recognized the thing in front of him, the troll. There was no way, the troll appeared too frequently in the wizard's storybook, and it was difficult for him not to recognize the ugly big thing in front of him. Now that it appeared here, he knew that it was obviously related to Quirrell, but he remembered that the troll didn't seem to appear at this time. Hulu hulu. The troll saw Hope, made a low sound, held the thick wooden stick in one hand, raised it high, and smashed it towards Hope. Hope raised his eyebrows slightly and stood still. When the giant stick was raised high and had not yet fallen, the troll's figure suddenly swayed and his body couldn't stop sinking. The ground where the troll stood seemed to collapse suddenly because it couldn't bear the weight of the troll, and half of his body fell into it. He could only abandon the wooden stick in his hand and use both hands to support the corridor floor. Hulu hulu. The lower half of the troll's body was suspended in the air, appearing on the ceiling of the first floor, with two soles of his feet swinging randomly in the air. He couldn't find a foothold for a while, and he didn't know how to support his body with his hands. So he roared anxiously. Fortunately, the troll was not hopelessly stupid. He finally thought of using his hands to support the ground and pull his whole body out of the hole. However, it seemed to be stuck just right. He was unmoved even after wasting a lot of effort, and continued to roar anxiously. This was naturally Hope's method. He directly collapsed the corridor floor with the characteristics of digging soil and stone. In order to prevent the troll from running out, he even controlled the corridor floor to clamp the troll's body tightly. He didn't want to get out for a while, unless he was strong enough to collapse the entire corridor. Looking at the troll who couldn't move, Hope licked his lips slightly, pulled out the magic wand from the wizard robe, and waved it gently. Petrify all. A spell was successfully cast and landed on the troll, but it was obvious that it had no effect. The troll was still struggling lively. Hope couldn't help but shake his head. It seemed that most magical creatures had magic resistance, but the petrification spell had no effect at all. If you want to deal with such a troll, some powerful offensive spells are more useful. Mr. Hope. Just then, Professor McGonagall hurried over and saw Hope standing in front of the troll and couldn't help shouting seriously. "Professor McGonagall, this troll has trampled the corridor of the castle." Hope shrugged and pointed at the troll in front of him. "Even so, you shouldn't be so close to this troll. It is very likely that he will get out," Professor McGonagall said with a serious face, accusing Hope of being reckless. "That was a troll. If you were hit by it by accident, you would become a meat pie." "Yes, Professor." Hope did not refute and admitted his mistake honestly. "You go to the hall first. The other students are all there. I'll handle this." Professor McGonagall kept her eyes on the troll and never let go of the wand in her hand. Seeing that the troll did not break free, she relaxed a little. Hope naturally had no objection and came to the hall. The hall was full of little wizards who were chattering about something. He soon found Harry and the others among the group. "Chen-Ku, great, you're fine." Hermione saw Hua-Ku and was relieved. After Harry and the others told her, the cover knew what happened. Someone saw the troll from a height in the city, screamed and fled to the bottom, shouting loudly while running. With that, the people who heard the news also ran downstairs, and finally gathered in the auditorium. With Dumbledore present here, there will be no problems. On the contrary, the trolls wandering outside are the most dangerous. Professor McGonagall and Snape hurriedly left the auditorium. After all, they could not ensure that all the students were here. Students in the city were likely to encounter trolls, and the danger must be eliminated as soon as possible. At this time, Hope found that Professor Quirrell hurriedly ran in, and seemed to be quite frightened. He walked to Dumbledore and said something. "Students who haven't eaten yet can continue to eat. The trolls have been controlled by the professors. Don't worry, but don't leave the auditorium for the time being." Dumbledore cast a voice amplification spell to make the sound overwhelm the noisy auditorium. Hope glanced at Quirrell. It seemed that Voldemort could no longer hold back and was about to make some small moves. However, it shouldn't be so urgent. Could it be because of him? The only variable here was Hope himself. Perhaps some of Hope's previous actions made Voldemort feel that there was an opportunity? Or was it because Snape's recent overtime inspections put some pressure on Voldemort? Hope didn't know, but since Voldemort had already made some small moves, maybe he should get the Philosopher's Stone to avoid more trouble. For the students, this was just a small episode. After all, most of the students had never seen a troll. But when they left the hall and dispersed, they found a huge pit in the corridor on the second floor, and they all gathered around the pit to discuss it. Is the power of the troll so terrifying? Ron looked at the pit and said with some horror. They have great power. It seems that the book is not wrong. Hermione nodded in agreement. And the troll's body was nowhere to be found. Could it be dragged away by Hagrid? It's not impossible, Hope Minglu guessed. The impact of this incident was just to give students another topic to talk about. For example, Harry heard Ron and Harry discussing it enthusiastically after returning to the dormitory, and even discussed who was more powerful, the troll or the giant. If Hermione was around, she would definitely criticize them for being ignorant. After all, giants and trolls are not of the same level. In front of giants, the trolls are at most 10 little brats who have not grown up yet. Late at night, 3 snoring sounds were heard in the dormitory, 1 big and 2 small, and they all seemed to be sleeping very deeply. A figure lying flat on the bed suddenly sat up, got off the bed slowly, put on his shoes, opened the dormitory door, and sneaked out. Hope went straight to the bathroom. After entering the bathroom, he first confirmed whether there was anyone there and made sure that no one would disturb him. Then he walked into a cubicle and locked the door. The next moment, his figure suddenly rose, as tall as an adult, and his face changed, full of coldness. Like a cold-blooded killer, covered in a black robe. After thinking for a while, Hope wiped his face and suddenly a mask appeared. Under the hood, the only thing that was exposed was the pair of slightly glowing eyes. He activated the treasure perception and determined the location of the magic stone. The next moment, his figure disappeared instantly. When Hope appeared, he first looked around. There was no fire here, and it was shrouded in darkness. Fluorescent flash. Zhai Jie's mind moved, and a bright light popped out from his finger and fell into the air, illuminating the entire space like an incandescent bulb. This is a very empty secret room. There is no entrance. There is only a large mirror in the secret room. Chapter 58 System Upgrade Conditions. Mirror of Erist. The golden frame was almost as high as the ceiling, and two golden claws were supporting the ground. Hope looked at the mirror naturally, but saw that the mirror was gray and seemed to be changing. Looking at the picture in the mirror, Hope's eyes flickered slightly, and his heart sank slightly, but he didn't feel any surprise. The mirror reflected his desire, not for anything else, but for his past. Hope slowly stretched out his hand and placed it on the mirror, his palm pressed tightly, feeling a little cold, and the picture in the mirror quickly dissipated like a smoke garden. This mirror is obviously solid, so it is naturally impossible to reach into it. He closed his eyes, turned on the treasure sensor, and found the magic stone hidden in the mirror. He felt the magic stone in the mirror very clearly and gently grabbed it. The next moment, Hope opened his eyes and saw that he was holding a crystal-clear red gem in his hand, which was slightly larger than an egg. Just with this appearance, it would probably make a lot of money if he sold it. At this moment, the mirror suddenly flashed, and he saw a flash of fire and turned his head quickly. An old man with a long white beard and pajamas was standing behind him, with a giant bird with red feathers standing on his shoulder. Dumbledore. Before Hope could carefully observe the most powerful white wizard in Europe, he saw the old man's lips move slightly, and a spell shot out instantly. No martial ethics. Hope secretly complained in his heart. The spell had already fallen on him, but it had no effect. Dumbledore's old eyes suddenly showed a trace of doubt, and the next moment he saw this guy who was hiding his head and tail and didn't even dare to show his face suddenly shrink and disappear directly. Apparition. Dumbledore's face changed obviously, but he couldn't do anything at this time. The whole secret room was empty, leaving only him and the mirror of Erist, and the phoenix on his shoulder. He was a little unbelievable, and his pupils shrank slightly. The trap he carefully set for Voldemort did not work at all. He was broken into the secret room without any warning. If he had not set up detection magic in the secret room and sensed someone breaking in, he would have arrived here instantly with the help of the phoenix and would not have known that his things were stolen. Not only that, his most critical means, the mirror of Erist. It did not stop the other party. It took a long time for the other party to step into this place and obtain the Philosopher's Stone. He was so easily able to solve his means, as if he knew his arrangement very well. Dumbledore's face sank. The other party also used apparition to leave here directly, breaking through the protective magic of Hogwarts. Moreover, his magic did not work on the other party. All this was beyond his expectations. At this moment, Dumbledore couldn't help but wonder if he was a little old, and his carefully laid out layout was easily cracked by others. He couldn't be sure that the other party was related to Voldemort, but now he could only make the worst plan. He handed over the Philosopher's Stone to Voldemort, and never thought that he would make such a fatal mistake. He could already imagine Voldemort secretly mocking him, using the Philosopher's Stone stolen from him to restore his body and make a comeback. Things suddenly became very bad, just because of his mistake. On the other side, Hope had already appeared in the capital, with bright sunlight shining through the window, shining the red gem in his hand. Is this the Philosopher's Stone? Hope observed the Philosopher's Stone in his hand curiously. But he didn't study it carefully, and put it in the cabinet in the living room. He pushed the cabinet and disappeared again. In an instant, he returned to the bathroom in the Gryffindor common room of Hogwarts, dispelled his self-transformation, pushed open the partition door and walked out of the bathroom and returned to the dormitory. Hearing the snoring without any change, he immediately relaxed, lay on the bed with satisfaction, and fell asleep peacefully. He was not sure whether Dumbledore had the means to find the Philosopher's Stone. After all, there were too many strange means in the magic world. If there was such a means, it would be the same wherever it was placed. Of course, at least it could not be placed on the body, lest it be caught on the spot. Soon Hope fell asleep peacefully, as if nothing had happened. On the other side, Dumbledore did not have the same thoughts as Hope, sitting behind the desk in the principal's office, awake all night. Waking up in the morning was a new day, and today was Saturday. Feeling better, Hope stretched, it was almost noon, and went out to have lunch with Harry and the others leisurely. The Philosopher's Stone was taken away? In the principal's office, Snape looked at Dumbledore in shock. Yes, Severus. Dumbledore's old face showed a hint of apology. I told you that your idea was rotten at the beginning. Snape's voice resounded in the headmaster's office. He knew what this meant. It meant that after Voldemort got the Philosopher's Stone, he would quickly recover from his weakness and return with great force. Calm down, Severus. Things are not at their worst yet. Dumbledore had regained his composure after a night, and even his tone was a little stable. How did he take it away? How did he get through layers of obstacles and take it away right under your nose? Don't tell me you were still asleep at that time. Snape's face was gloomier than ever before, but he did not maintain his usual calmness. He asked excitedly. This is not important anymore. It is not certain that the Philosopher's Stone was taken away by Voldemort. It is possible that someone else took it. Dumbledore looked at Snape's irritable eyes with a calm look and said slowly. That means you don't even know who took the Philosopher's Stone. Snape obviously didn't think this was good news, and even guessed from this news that Dumbledore didn't even know anything. So now we need to confirm whether the Philosopher's Stone is really in Voldemort's hands. This is very important, Severus. I need you to find the person hiding in Hogwarts. Find him out, and maybe things will be clear. Dumbledore said calmly, his tone was very calm, and he seemed to be confident. The previous riot was enough to show that someone did try to enter the Chamber of Secrets to steal the Philosopher's Stone. This person must be in Hogwarts, but he couldn't be sure who it was. The trap of the Philosopher's Stone was originally set for this person. What about you? The irritability in Snape's eyes subsided in an instant, but Dumbledore's tone still highlighted his unrest. I'm going to leave for a while to meet Nicholas Flamel. Maybe he has a way to get the Philosopher's Stone back. After all, it was created by him. If it's timely enough, maybe he can stop him before the situation gets worse. Dumbledore has always believed that Voldemort is not completely dead, but he has not been found in these years. In desperation, he can only use the magic stone to lure him out. It was originally a safe bet, just waiting for Voldemort to step on the trap they set for him. But now that the bait has been eaten, he can only take the initiative to attack and follow the waves on the water to find Voldemort's traces. Otherwise, when Voldemort hides again, I am afraid that his power will be stronger than 10 years ago when he appears again in a few years. Snape left the principal's office. Snape's face was gloomy, like a dark cloud pressing down on the head. No one dared to walk past him when they saw him, for fear of being angered by Snape, who was in a bad mood. Hope and his friends had just come out of the auditorium after lunch and were walking towards the dormitory when they saw Snape's face. At first glance, they knew that Snape was in a very bad mood. Harry was so scared that he wanted to pull them to another way, but Snape's voice sounded at this time. Potter, you don't know how to say hello to the professor when you see him? Is this what your father taught you? Oh, I forgot, you don't have a father. Snape was as sharp-tongued as always, and he leaned on Harry's dead father when he opened his mouth. But this time Harry didn't refute it. He was not stupid. He saw that Snape was in a bad mood and wanted to find someone to vent his anger on, trying to deliberately anger him so that he could take it out on him in a legitimate way. After experiencing this kind of trash talk a lot, although he was still angry, he could not bear it anymore. Seeing that Harry ignored him, Snape's eyes flashed with disgust, and he continued in a cold voice, I advise you to be honest recently. I will keep an eye on you. Before Dumbledore comes back, I will find a reason for you to drop out of school and get you out of Hogwarts. After saying this, Snape left directly. Seeing Snape leave, Harry was relieved and said unconvinced, he must know that I found out that he wanted to steal the things guarded by the three-headed dog, and deliberately retaliated against me and tried to drive me out, so that no one would know his plan. Hope looked at Snape's back as he left, his eyes moved slightly. Why did he feel that the point of Snape's words was that Dumbledore was not in school? He seemed to be deliberately telling them this information. In that case, why don't you just tell Professor McGonagall or Dumbledore? Hope absent-mindedly continued, because Dumbledore believes him. Yesterday, when Ron and Hermione and I went to Hagrid's hut, we accidentally learned something from Hagrid. Harry looked around and made sure no one was eavesdropping, and then whispered. Hope then looked at Harry, wanting to know what Harry knew. The three-headed dog in the corridor on the 4th floor is Fluffy, Hagrid's pet. Professor Dumbledore borrowed him to guard something. I heard from Hagrid that the name Nicholas Flamel was related to the thing being guarded, but no matter how I asked, Hagrid wouldn't tell us and asked us not to tell anyone. I told Hagrid that Snape wanted to steal something, but Hagrid didn't believe it. He also said that Dumbledore believed in Snape and would never do that. Obviously. They were all deceived by Snape. Harry said, unconvinced. If even Hagrid didn't believe it, then Dumbledore probably wouldn't believe it either. They were now planning to find evidence and catch Snape's handle. As they talked, they walked towards the Gryffindor common room. Harry also invited Hope to go and check the name Nicholas Flamel, but Hope directly declined. The Philosopher's Stone was in his hands, so what else was there to check? It would be great if he had this time to study the Philosopher's Stone. On the other side, Snape came to the hall, stopped Malfoy who was about to leave, and ordered lightly. You go and inform Professor McGonagall, tell her not to go to the principal's office to find Dumbledore recently. Hope guessed correctly, he was deliberately spreading the news that Dumbledore was not in school. In fact, he was not as irritable as he showed in the office. He was a gloomy person. He just wanted to take the opportunity to blame Dumbledore, but he did not think that the information revealed by Dumbledore was useless. Even Dumbledore was not sure whether it was Voldemort who stole the Philosopher's Stone, which means that this possibility is true. If it was not Voldemort who took the Philosopher's Stone, it also means that they did not know that the Philosopher's Stone was gone under Dumbledore's nose. At this time, if the mice in Hogwarts made any movement, it meant that the Philosopher's Stone was really not taken away by Voldemort's people. Of course, he would not rule out another possibility, that he would plan to leave after stealing something, and he was ready to stare at anyone who wanted to leave Hogwarts. However, what Snape didn't know was that the person who stole the Philosopher's Stone had left without him noticing. When he arrived in the capital, Hope couldn't wait to open the drawer and take out the crystal-clear red gem. From the outside, it was just a priceless gem, but holding it in his hand, Hope could feel the abundant magic power in it. Turning stones into gold and refining elixirs of immortality are the most precious functions of the Philosopher's Stone in the rumors. Hope didn't care much about turning stones into gold. He could sneak into any gold mountain at any time, even if it was a hidden gold mine that had not been discovered by Muggles. This was not a problem, it was just more troublesome. But the elixir of immortality was very tempting, even Hope couldn't escape it. And this was not a rumor based on hearsay, but it really existed. Nicholas Flamel had lived for many years, so even if no one else had really drunk the elixir of immortality, old medicine, and did not doubt the truth of this matter. But, it is not that you can get the elixir of immortality by getting this thing, but you can use it to make the elixir of immortality, which involves potions. Unfortunately, he is a potion-learning Muggle, so the elixir of immortality is not possible for the time being. However, he still wanted to see the strangeness of the Philosopher's Stone, and immediately held the Philosopher's Stone, wanting to turn stone into gold. He didn't know how to operate it, but he thought about it, used the Philosopher's Stone as a wand, held the Philosopher's Stone tightly in his right hand, and focused on a glass cup on the wooden table in the living room, raised the index finger of his right hand and pointed at the glass cup. The next moment, a magical scene happened, and the glass cup began to change, slowly changing from top to bottom, from glass to gold. Hope picked up the gold cup on the table with a surprised look on his face, and examined it carefully. His fingernails pressed hard on the wall of the cup, and a mark actually appeared. His face couldn't help but look a little strange. Why did it feel that turning stone into gold was so similar to transfiguration? Hope casually placed the Philosopher's Stone on the table, and then picked up a glass from the table. Under the self-transfiguration feature, the glass also turned directly into a golden cup, which was no different from the real golden cup in his left hand. Of course, when Hope put down the golden cup in his right hand and let go, the golden cup turned back to its original appearance. Glass turned into gold. Hope's eyes flashed with a thought, how could this be somewhat similar to the principle of transfiguration? The transformation between matter and matter is a course for the first and second grades in Hogwarts. After that, there are also difficult courses such as the transformation of matter and life, and the transformation of life and life. Which one is not more difficult than this one? But turning stone into gold is not considered as transfiguration, which means that it really changes the nature of things, and it is even irreversible. Hope immediately felt that he had found the real function of the Philosopher's Stone, which is to solidify the deformation effect, but this deformation only limits the deformation of matter and gold. Strictly speaking, it is really an alchemical product made for a certain purpose. Maybe Nicholas Flamel originally created the Philosopher's Stone just to turn stones into gold, so this transformation can only be fixed as the conversion of matter and gold. Hope vaguely felt that he was about to find out the characteristics of the Philosopher's Stone, but it didn't work at all. Although the system boasted that it was a system for the fusion of all things, it currently only supported the fusion of life, like a semi-finished system that had not yet developed subsequent functions. Hope couldn't help but complain in his heart, and he really didn't know how to fuse matter. However, the system seemed to have sensed Hope's complaints and suddenly popped up. After completing an S-level fusion, other functions of the system will be enabled. Hope was slightly surprised. He didn't expect that his casual complaints would actually attract the system's induction. Wouldn't he have complained earlier if he had known? It's just an S-level fusion, which is a bit difficult. The fire dragon was only an A-level difficulty before, and it took him a long time. Even one of the most powerful and dangerous magical animals in the magic world is only of A-level difficulty. Where can I find life of S-level difficulty? He estimated that even the phoenix might not be able to meet this requirement. I don't know if the real dragon mentioned by Huobuffon before belongs to it. If it doesn't belong to it, then it can only merge life forever. Warm reminder, the host can open his eyes to see the universe. Suddenly I received a prompt from the system. After reading the above content, Hope was completely stunned. Thanks to Lihua Zhuke for the monthly ticket. Chapter 59, One Person's Drama. Hope's eyes flashed with surprise. Is this saying that there are S-class life forms in the universe? But thinking about it, Harry Potter has never had the concept of the universe, so it's really hard to say what the universe is like. Explore the universe? This is still very difficult for wizards, but if they are willing, the difficulty may be much lower than that of muggles. Energy. The magic power of wizards is a powerful energy source, which can even change reality. As for eating and drinking, it is not a big problem to leave it to magic. There is no concept of oxygen among wizards, but I believe they can develop corresponding magic if they are willing, such as summoning magic like clear water and springs. As for vehicles, a suitcase like Newt Scamander can achieve space travel after modification. The only problem is speed. At present, the flying tools in the magic world, such as flying brooms or mahogany swords, are much faster than ordinary cars, but they are not of the same order of magnitude as rockets. For example, if the flying broom is too fast, it may cause the destruction of the broom, which is also a problem of magic technology. Hope shook his head. There was no point in considering the universe at the moment. Besides, the system might be lying to him. Maybe there really was S-class life in the universe, but he might have to spend his whole life to find it, or he might never find it in his lifetime. Of course, no matter what, he still had to try this direction of upgrading the system. First, he would take the real dragon to see if it was an S-class life. Ever since Huobuffon mentioned the remains of a real dragon, Hope had not been idle. Sometimes he would try to search for it when he was bored in class. The so-called remains of a real dragon were not found even after searching all over the old house. Not to mention other things, at least the obvious thing like the dragon head skeleton should be easy to find, but it was not. It was not that he found nothing. He roughly determined the possible location of the Bai family's treasure house and was screening them one by one, but it would take some time. He was not in a hurry, so he did not put down all his things and rest time to search all night. Hope lowered his head slightly and looked at the Philosopher's Stone on the table. As for where to put the Philosopher's Stone, he was a little embarrassed. If Dumbledore had any means to retrieve it, he would be found no matter where he put it, and there was no absolutely safe place. Or maybe he could do it in the dark and stuff it directly under Dumbledore's bed. Of course, this was just a joke. The magic power of the Philosopher's Stone was abundant, and it was impossible for a powerful wizard to ignore it. Suddenly he felt that there was really no absolutely safe place in the world that could stop Dumbledore. Even if it was Gringotts, it would not be difficult for Dumbledore to get in. If the Philosopher's Stone had not been transferred from Gringotts in time, the thing would have been taken by Quirrell. If Quirrell could do it, Dumbledore could do it too. After thinking about it, hope really brought the thing back to Hogwarts. It was indeed a dark place, and he came to the basement of Hogwarts Castle directly from the Forbidden Forest by digging soil and digging stones. He went 500 meters underground, through the safe containing the Philosopher's Stone there, and left. This place is underground, and his treasure is sensing and monitoring. As long as he is still in Hogwarts, its movements are within Hope's monitoring range. Once someone moves, he will naturally sense it. Unless the other party can leave the underground before he reacts, Hope is confident that he can keep the other party. Hope, who returned to Hogwarts, was slightly relieved. He sensed the old wand on Dumbledore and confirmed that Dumbledore was not here as Snape said. In this case, he can start to make trouble. But not today. Today is Saturday, and senior students will go out to Hogsmeade Village, and there will be fewer people eating in the auditorium. In a blink of an eye, it was Sunday dinner time. Hope turned around and changed directly into a slightly younger wizard with a purple turban on his head. The only difference is that there is no smell on his body. The person he transformed into was naturally Quirrell. He sensed the wand on Professor Quirrell and confirmed that he was not in Hogwarts, which gave him the opportunity to pretend. Hope changed his shape and appeared outside the hall, while Snape was inside. He took a deep breath, shook his head and body, and warmed himself up. The next moment, his face suddenly changed, and he became much paler by self-transfiguration, without a trace of blood. Then he rushed into the auditorium in a panic, shouting, "Oh no, the giant monster appeared again, I saw him on the 4th floor." Hope used all his acting skills in his life, and hurriedly trotted from the auditorium door to the professor's seat in the eyes of all the students. He was almost out of breath, and suddenly fell down in front of the professor's seat, looking around in panic. "Dumbledore, where is Professor Dumbledore?" Snape stood up immediately, and looked at Quirrell, who was pretending to be Hope, with some disgust. It was hard to believe that a professor of defense against the dark arts could be so afraid of a giant monster. Dumbledore actually let such a person be the professor of defense against the dark arts. It was really. All students stay here, and the heads of each college count the number of people in their own colleges. After saying that, Snape hurried away, and before leaving, he deliberately glanced at Harry coldly. All the students looked at each other, a little worried. Wasn't the previous troll solved? How come another troll appeared? This Hogwarts is too unsafe, it has never happened before. After a while, Quirrell, who was sitting on the ground, suddenly realized it, stood up, and said loudly, "Yes. Yes. I have to help Professor Snape." After saying that, Professor Quirrell, dressed as Hope, hurried out in the eyes of the students. It was just not long after that, someone in the auditorium suddenly screamed. The scream was piercing, and it echoed throughout the auditorium. The man pointed at the door of the auditorium with one hand, his eyes were full of fear, and his body was shaking spontaneously. "Troll, troll!" Everyone looked at the door of the auditorium at once, and their hearts suddenly sank. Some people's legs were weak. A huge figure suddenly appeared at the door of the auditorium. The figure was almost as tall as the door, with a head like a sharpened pencil, a strong body, and a huge wooden stick in his hand. "Hulu hulu!" The giant roared at them loudly, causing screams in the auditorium. This giant was naturally transformed by Hope, and even the wooden stick was so. In fact, it would not even hurt when it hit a person. It was all fake. The next moment, Hope raised the thick wooden stick in his hand and smashed it hard on the ground as a demonstration. The wooden stick fell to the ground, and the ground was embedded in it like dough. Many people's faces changed. How much strength can do this? Hope naturally cooperated with the characteristics of digging soil and stones to do this. If they were a little calmer, they would probably be able to notice feeling something unusual. Hope raised the stick and then stepped towards them step by step with his sturdy feet. "Quick, cast a spell on him." Weasley Percy was the first to react and shouted to the little wizards around, which made them wake up and draw their wands. "Faint. Expelliarmus. Petrify all. Imprison quickly." Countless spells fell on Hope, stimulating Hope to scream in anger. Of course it was just acting. He could feel that he felt nothing when these spells fell on him. Except for the spell cast by the last third-grade student, Imprison quickly. A normal person would not use such a spell on a troll, because this spell is okay for binding wizards, but it is simply wishful thinking to want to bind a troll with a huge calendar. A rope shot out from the wand, wrapped around Hope's giant feet several times, and then suddenly contracted, tightly tying his 2 feet together. Hope didn't feel anything wrong at this time, and instinctively tried to burst the rope, but the rope didn't move at all. He woke up instantly. He didn't have the strength of the troll, so he couldn't break free. Moreover, although his tough skin could resist magic attacks, this kind of spell didn't attack him, but just tied him up. Damn! Hope cursed in his heart, feeling like he was playing. Quick! Use the fast imprisonment. Fred saw this scene and shouted loudly with a face full of surprise. Compared with other attack magic, the fast imprisonment is not very advanced, so there are actually many people who know it. Of course, the lower grade students can only stand there and watch, like Harry, but seeing the troll like this, Harry was also excited. Finished. Hope said secretly in his heart. Countless ropes shot out, wrapped around him, and tied him up quickly. In a blink of an eye, he felt that he was tied up by ropes and couldn't move, like being trapped like a dumpling. He didn't just watch, he had already cast the unlocking spell silently, and found that it didn't work. This magic seemed to be really only for the door, and it didn't work at all for untying the knot. Of course, it would only take him a few minutes to break these ropes, and there were even many ways. For example, spit out a flame to burn these things, seek, completely, or directly transform and shrink the body so that these ropes can naturally break free. But these are not things that the troll can do. Hope was very helpless. In the end, he could only leave while roaring and jumping, but his goal was almost achieved. He wanted to play a play and pretend that he couldn't withstand the magic attack and left, but being trapped like a dumpling and leaving was indeed a bit beyond his expectation. Naturally, some students wanted to pursue the victory, but they were stopped by some rational prefects. Some senior students had already seen that all their attack spells had no effect. The troll's skin was thicker than they imagined. It was easy to encounter accidents if they rashly chased it. As the troll fled, all the students cheered. This was their victory. They held up the cups on the table to celebrate. After a while, a man with a gloomy face walked in. All the students couldn't help but quiet down when they saw this figure, and the atmosphere suddenly became cold. The person who came was Snape, and his gloomy eyes swept around. "What are you doing?" Snape asked coldly. "Professor, we just drove away the troll." A senior Slytherin student answered the question of his dean. "I already know, you did a good job." Snape's face relaxed slightly, and he actually praised him for the first time. Everyone looked at Snape in disbelief. "Given your performance, Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff will all get 50 points, and Layton will get 60 points. The other students' faces sank slightly, but they didn't say anything. They were used to such things. "Sure enough, this is Snape," Harry complained in a low voice. "Stay here, no one should go out without my permission." Snape looked around again, making sure that these stupid trolls understood what he said, and then hurried out, as if to chase the trolls that they had driven away. As Snape left, the hall returned to its previous joy, and everyone was showing off how many spells they had cast against the trolls before. At this time, Snape turned back again, his face gloomy. "The professors are outside risking their lives to find the trolls, but you are here laughing and talking. You really should use your troll-like brains to think about whose safety the professors are working for." Snape looked around, stared at them viciously, and shouted angrily. At this moment, all the students were stunned, looking at Snape, vaguely aware that something was wrong. "Professor, have you just come back?" Malfoy looked at Snape like this, swallowed his saliva, and couldn't help but ask boldly. "What do you want to say?" Snape didn't ask or answer, but turned to look at Malfoy and asked in a deep voice. "Just now, we drove the troll away, and you came back to give us extra points, you should remember it." Under Snape's venomous death gaze, Malfoy was also a little nervous and spoke quickly and panicked. The other students were staring at Snape's face at this moment, expecting Snape to answer. When he heard Malfoy's words, Snape's face suddenly became ugly. Other students also guessed something from Snape's expression. The Snape just now was actually a fake. "You bunch of rubbish, you can't even recognize the imposter. I think the troll was so stupid that it ran into your spell and was driven away by you." Snape cursed angrily, looking at each student with a mocking face, until they lowered their heads in shame, and then hurried away. That Snape turned out to be a fake. Who could have guessed that? He is as annoying as the real one. I said, how could Snape praise people? It turns out he is fake. Ron said indignantly after Snape left. Yeah, he didn't do anything. At least we drove the troll away. Harry also nodded and said in great agreement. Hope won't be in any danger. Hermione said a little worriedly. Don't worry, Hope is definitely in Hogsmeade at this time. He usually comes back very late. Ron said confidently, with some envy in his heart. Harry also nodded in agreement. After a while, two figures appeared outside the hall. At this time, all the students had learned from the previous lesson and stared at the door. However, when they saw who was coming, all the students were stunned. One of them was Snape, and the other was Professor McGonagall. Where is Quirrell? We didn't see the troll, he said. Snape glanced at the hall with a cold face, and did not find Quirrell's figure, and then asked. Hiss. As soon as these words came out, many people's faces changed, and they couldn't help but take a breath, looking at Snape in disbelief, and took a step back. To be honest, they have lost any ability to distinguish now, and it is difficult for them to know whether the Snape next to Professor McGonagall is real. From now on, the first two Snapes may be fake, of course, it is also possible that this Snape is fake. At this moment, they wanted to go home. This was too scary. It was like a haunted place. Snape and McGonagall looked at these students with some doubts. They didn't know what these students were afraid of. They were not trolls. Professor McGonagall, be careful. This Snape might be fake. Harry saw Professor McGonagall staying beside Snape and was a little worried about the safety of his dean. Pull up the courage and said loudly. Snape and McGonagall were slightly stunned and they heard what Harry said. Snape was about to say something, but Malfoy spoke first. Nonsense, how do you know that Professor Snape is fake? What if Professor McGonagall is fake? When other students heard this, they immediately felt that it made sense. They remembered that Professor McGonagall had been impersonated before. How could they know that this Professor McGonagall in front of them was fake? Professor McGonagall is real. Snape and McGonagall frowned and looked at each other, obviously knowing what happened. Snape's hand in his wizard robe quietly grasped the wand, and his shoulder, which was originally parallel to the table, slightly tilted. He first notified McGonagall and asked McGonagall to search for the troll in the castle together, but they searched separately. They just met before. Who can say that the other party has no problems? Professor McGonagall also turned to look at Snape, with a look of uncertainty in his eyes, and his hand inadvertently grasped the wand. Chapter 60 True or False? Do you think, are they all fake? Neville suddenly asked. As soon as this sentence came out, the atmosphere in the whole hall suddenly became cold. The whole audience was silent, looking at Neville in shock, and Neville shrank his neck. And the next moment, many young wizards took action, took out their wands and pointed them at the two professors, their faces full of fear and suspicion. At this time, there was only suspicion in the hall. Severus, you asked me for something during the summer vacation, do you remember? Professor McGonagall looked at Snape with a serious face and asked. Snape's eyes showed a trace of hesitation when he heard it. He glanced at Harry and said slowly, remember, you rejected me and said it was Dumbledore's decision. Professor McGonagall nodded, and the fingers holding the wand suddenly loosened a little, no longer so hard. "Don't doubt it, Professor Snape and I are real." Professor McGonagall raised her head slightly and said in a deep voice. However, the students at this moment have become frightened birds, and have lost the ability to distinguish. They did not relax because of McGonagall's words. Professor McGonagall felt a little headache when she saw this. It seemed that the imposter had messed up the school. Then McGonagall talked about some things with the students, and then her identity was confirmed. Although the students in the entire auditorium believed it at this time, they still felt a little strange. After Professor McGonagall's questioning, Snape and McGonagall knew what happened, and finally knew why the students doubted their identities. McGonagall and Snape looked at each other and felt it was a difficult situation. However, Mag also keenly noticed that the imposter was just pretending and did not cause any actual harm to the students. Compared with the imposter, the matter of the troll seemed to be more important. The students said that the troll had been to the auditorium, and there were indeed traces of the troll on the ground, but the troll was such an obvious target, but they did not find it. Suddenly, a footstep sounded from outside, and it sounded neither hurried nor slow. Everyone looked at the door of the auditorium, wondering whether it would be the troll or the imposter. Finally, the figure appeared at the door of the auditorium. Seeing that figure, Snape's eyes flickered slightly, and his hand had already clenched the wand under his wizard robe. "Huh? Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape, why are you all here?" The person who came was Professor Quirrell, wearing a purple turban, and walked in with some confusion. The students present showed a trace of surprise again. Professor Quirrell seemed to have lost his memory. It was he who came to inform Snape that the troll had appeared before. Now he was wondering why they were all here. This was too abnormal. Ron shrank his neck, touched his arm, and felt goosebumps all over his body. Most of the other students thought so too. They felt that tonight was too scary, just like it was like a haunted place. They only found out at the end that the people who had been communicating with them normally before were ghosts. This was really disturbing. Snape did not stop Quirrell from approaching. He was confident that he could take action before Quirrell behaved abnormally, and he had not confirmed whether Quirrell was real or fake. As Quirrell approached, Snape could not help but sniff and smelled a disgusting smell, like garlic. His brows suddenly frowned. Quirrell, who ran to report to him before, did not have this smell. In other words, the previous Quirrell was fake, and he did not find it because he did not think deeply about the troll at that time. "Where have you been, Professor Quirrell?" Professor McGonagall asked. "Sorry, I went to Hogsmeade and drank a glass of butterbeer," Professor Quirrell said timidly with a trace of apology on his face. Snape whispered to McGonagall, saying the flaws of the imposter and confirming the authenticity of this Professor Quirrell. So the Quirrell at the beginning was fake, but the troll did appear. Could it be that the eye monster was put in by the imposter? Professor McGonagall and Snape both thought of the same point, but they were also confused. It seemed a bit strange that the troll could be tied up by the rope of the speed-binding spell. But they didn't think too deeply about it. After all, the Polyjuice potion couldn't pretend to be a troll. McGonagall then told Professor Quirrell about the matter. After listening, Professor Quirrell showed a trace of horror. "This is terrible." Professor Quirrell couldn't help but mutter absent-mindedly. "The troll is still wandering in the school. Professor Quirrell, these students will be left to you to take care of. Let's go find the troll." Professor McGonagall immediately gave an order. In this case, she and Snape could only go out to look for it. After all, Quirrell didn't look like he could deal with the troll alone, although he was the professor of the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Me? Quirrell pointed at himself in surprise, a little unbelievable and a little unconfident. "Yes, if someone comes in later, you need to verify the other party's identity first. Let's set a password, iced lemon juice. If the identity is wrong, you can subdue the other party first," Professor McGonagall said seriously, without a trace of joking, and handed this difficult task to Quirrell. Of course, this is already the easiest task. From the previous situation, the imposter did not show any aggressiveness. Okay. Quirrell had no choice but to agree. Then McGonagall and Snape went out again, leaving Quirrell and the students in the hall. "Professor Quirrell, you can't be fake too?" a Ravenclaw girl asked worriedly, and the eyes of others were suddenly focused on him. Before Quirrell could answer anything, Malfoy showed a look of disgust and said first, "You can tell the real one by smelling the smell on him." This statement was recognized by many students. Others might be fake, but Professor Quirrell's smell was definitely real. I didn't expect that one day the smell they disliked could make them feel at ease. It was incredible. Quirrell didn't get angry when he heard this. Instead, he said with some relaxation, "Mr. Malfoy, you are so smart." However, only a short while later, several footsteps were heard outside the auditorium. All the students looked at the entrance of the auditorium in response, holding their breath, wondering if the person coming was a human or a ghost. And Quirrell also looked at the entrance of the auditorium, frowning slightly, with a strange look in his eyes. The footsteps were getting closer and closer, and the candlelight outside also made their shadows appear first and get in. When they saw the three figures appearing at the entrance of the auditorium, all the students took a breath of cold air again. It was Snape, who had a very gloomy face and sharp eyes like a blade, and McGonagall, who had a dark face. Both of them held wands in their hands, and the third figure was Quirrell wearing a purple turban. Oh my God! At this moment, everyone was shocked, and instinctively looked at Professor Quirrell, who was closer to them, and took out their wands, but their bodies quickly squeezed to the back. In a blink of an eye, they had gathered together. Quirrell in the auditorium looked at McGonagall and Snape in a panic, and asked in astonishment, "Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape, what are you doing? Who are you?" Snape's eyes were sharp enough. After being fooled all night, he wanted to kill someone. Not long after they walked out, they met Professor Quirrell, who came back from outside. Seeing McGonagall and Snape raise their wands to him, they were puzzled, but Snape also smelled the garlic smell coming from Professor Quirrell, and his face suddenly changed. Both of them smelled of garlic, so it was not certain who was real and who was fake. It was also possible that the person in front of him was real, and the one in the auditorium was fake. McGonagall also thought of it, and her face turned black. If the one in the auditorium was fake, they would be equivalent to leaving a danger to the students who were unaware of it, and she didn't dare to think about what would happen. McGonagall quickly checked with Professor Quirrell in front of them some things that only they knew, and confirmed that Professor Quirrell in front of them was the real one. They hurried back to the auditorium. You are all imposters?" Quirrell, who was close to the students, asked with fear on his face. All the students' faces suddenly changed. It was not impossible that there were three imposters at the same time. They immediately pointed their wands at Snape and the other three in fear. Seeing the wands of these students pointing at him, Snape's face almost turned black. These little wizards were going to rebel. "By the way, the password, what is the password?" Quirrell on the student side seemed to have thought of something and asked urgently. In fact, he had to ask when he saw Snape's face gritting his teeth and looking like he would take action at any time. Of course, he was Hope. He was the best actor tonight, no one else. He played for a whole night and felt good, especially playing Snape twice. Seeing how scared these students were, it was definitely not a problem to be named the best actor. He didn't really want to come in dressed as Quirrell, especially before that. He knew through the treasure perception that Snape had returned to the hall, but the progress of fusing the boggart was only one step away, so he had to bite the bullet and act hard. Unexpectedly, before coming in, he suddenly remembered the loophole when he played Quirrell before, and deliberately went to find some garlic, which unexpectedly made him trust by mistake. To be honest, he was a little shocked at the time. Originally, he thought that after McGonagall and Snape left, he would find an excuse to go out and exit perfectly, but Quirrell was lucky enough to come back at this time. Quirrell might not meet McGonagall and Snape, but he still met them. It can only be said that it was God's will. But now, Hope still wants to try whether he can continue to act hard. This is his professional ethics as a best actor. He named this performance, "Can You Trust Me Again?" Of course, he was ready to slip away at any time. If he couldn't continue the performance, God knew what kind of spell Snape, who was on the verge of exploding, would cast. Even Hope, who had tough skin, didn't want to take it. Seeing Snape about to take action, Hope could only take the initiative, and ask for the password. McGonagall frowned and looked at Hope. She didn't know what the other party was still holding on to after he exploded. But just in case and to gain the trust of the students, she still said, "Iced lemon juice." Snape stared at Hope with his eyes. He promised that if the impostor dared to say that the password was wrong, he would let the other party taste his magic. In fact, at this moment, Hope really had this idea. Once he said that the other party's password was wrong, Snape would definitely attack him. He could pretend to be injured. What would the students think in this case? Probably they thought that the impostor had taken action and attacked Snape and the others. That scene must be very exciting. I believe it will become a rich school history that later generations will talk about with relish. If you give this scene a name, it must be Snape's Judgment Day. Unfortunately, this is just an idea. If Professor McGonagall was not here, maybe he would really try it. After all, a Snape and a Quirrell possessed by Voldemort would not be a big problem if they were injured. On the contrary, it would be welcomed. The password is correct. You are real, but why are you staying with someone pretending to be me? Hope looked surprised and asked in confusion. After hearing what Hope said, the students were relieved. At least Professor McGonagall and Snape were not fake, but what was the situation now? Which Professor Quirrell was the real one? Because you are fake. Snape said coldly, but he was not in a hurry to do it. What? I am real, haven't we checked it? Hope said in surprise. He knew in his heart that the situation was not favorable for him now. It was only a matter of time before he was exposed, and this time might only be a few seconds, or it might be in the next second. No, you are fake, we have confirmed it. McGonagall stepped forward and said with certainty. Without the real Quirrell speaking, Snape and McGonagall gave him the location of the gold water. They didn't do it now, just because Hope hadn't shown any threat, so they were willing to talk about it. You must have made a mistake. Be careful. You will be attacked by him. Hope was so anxious that his face was sweating and flushed. He advised earnestly. 0. At this time, he had to give a thumbs up to the self-transformation feature. The reason why he could hold on without performing rings most of the time was due to self-transformation. The sweat on his face and the flushed face at this moment were the result of self-transformation. Seeing Hope's appearance, Mag couldn't help but show a trace of doubt. The impostor on the opposite side seemed to be a little real. Did they really make a mistake? The one next to him was the impostor? Seeing Mag's expression, Hope was happy. If you don't believe it, I will confront him. I have a way to prove that I am real. Hope said hurriedly. Now he can only force the situation of the real and fake Monkey King. Mag and Snape looked at each other and saw the meaning in each other's eyes. There was no harm for them. They turned to look at Quirrell, whom they trusted, and saw Quirrell nodded, obviously agreeing. However, at McGonagall's request, Phasia could only walk away from the students and walk from the position close to the professor's seat to the side of the auditorium entrance. This process inevitably required walking past Snape, but fortunately there was a courtyard in Yangnai. The positions were obviously adjusted, and the students squeezed behind the professor's seat, while McGonagall and Snape stood in front of the students, facing the auditorium door. The two Quirrells were close to the auditorium entrance, facing each other on the left and right. How do you prove it? Looking at Hope on the left, Snape asked coldly, without putting down his wand, and it was very targeted, pointing at Hope. Hope suddenly showed a strange smile, but looked at Qigjia opposite, feeling a little uneasy under the pressure of his eyes. Aren't you always curious about the smell of my body? In fact, I have already told you that I hid some garlic on my head to drive away vampires. Hope reached out to the purple headscarf with one hand and took it off directly, revealing a few garlics. He held the garlic steadily in his hand. These garlics were secretly transformed by him using galleons. The students looked at this scene with shock on their faces, feeling that the mystery was finally solved. At this moment, Quirrell on the opposite side had an extremely ugly face, staring at Hope's eyes in disbelief, feeling that the other party knew something. McGregor and Snape naturally saw this look, and their brows immediately frowned. Quirrell looked very strange at the moment. Hope raised his head proudly and said, "You. No. No. This is my privacy, you are fake, I won't take it off." Quirrell's expression became very strange, not only fear, but also a little resentment. At this moment, Hope also had a trace of vigilance in his heart, ready to perform apparition at any time. "Look, he's exposed." Hope stared at Chijia, his mouth slightly raised. This was the last scene he prepared, to find a scapegoat to take all the blame for him. As long as something bigger happened, no one would care about his affairs. "No," Quirrell said excitedly. A trace of suspicion flashed in Snape's eyes, and the direction of the wand had changed unconsciously, pointing at the real Quirrell. "I think you have no choice." Snape stared at Quirrell and said coldly, "Professor Quirrell, the matter is serious, so I need your cooperation. If it's as you said, I will apologize to you." McGonagall also persuaded that if Quirrell's expression and look were not too abnormal, she might not really let Quirrell take off his turban for this matter. After all, there are more ways to prove it than this one thing. You are listening to it in Eugene Light Novels.